Good evening, everyone. It's December 20th, 2023. Welcome back to BRAP. We have a great show in store for everyone here tonight. Want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and hanging out with us for another live show. And please do me a favor, if you haven't noticed already, smash that like button. Please do me a favor if you haven't noticed already. Oops, sorry for the feedback there. And if you're new to the show, consider subscribing, hitting the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. So we definitely have a lot to talk about. Thought it was going to be a slow news week as we are at the tail end of 2023. That's not the case at all. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the Insomniac ransomware attack. And Bobby Kotick, there's an update with Bobby Kotick's departure of Activision. And also give our 2023 year in gaming review. And that should be a great conversation. I've been saying this for the majority of this year. I thought that 2023 was a great year for video games, and we have none other than first-time guest and gaming journalist with the Washington Post, Gene Park, also a co-host of the Punching Up podcast for Last Stand Media. Gene, welcome to BRAP. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening. It's you said it was a slow news week, but it's actually been kind of crazy this December, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been really crazy. Like I'm just usually it isn't this crazy. I mean, we've had a lot of stuff come out this past week, and again, I expected after the Game Awards to be very quiet, and that's not been the case at all. So, but we're happy to have you here, and looking forward to discussing these topics. And it's also great, by the way, having somebody who is in the DMV, as I'm also a resident here in the DMV, and it's just cool. Like there's actually quite a few of us who podcast that are in the DMV. Actually, Slimo Backslap, who's one of our co-hosts, lives in the DMV as well, and he's not able to join us tonight. So it's always great having local people here in the area to discuss video games with. So. Also with me, I have Game Logic. Logic, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Just okay. Well, any big plans for the holidays, Logic?
No, I don't know. Just play games, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be playing games. And speaking of playing video games, I did finally beat Baldur's Gate 3. And I got to say, I put over I probably put about 220 hours in.
Yeah.
Oh, and I started a second playthrough, and wow, I'm discovering things in Act 1 that I don't know how I missed some of these things. And the experience, well, mostly has been very similar. There have been some different things I didn't experience from my first playthrough, and I'm like, wow, like I could see myself doing a third playthrough and just doing things vastly different. I kind of played it very similar to my first playthrough, but again, there's some other things that I've done that have opened up different dialogue trees or dialogue sequences that I didn't experience before. And it just, I'll get into that game later as we talk about our 2023 year in gaming, but just a phenomenal game. So, all right, Gene. So I'm glad you joined us today because there's been some conversation around the gaming media coverage of the Insomniac ransomware attack and the leaks that happened as a result. But before we get to that, like I have to feel like, gee, how hard is it to be a gaming journalist? Because I feel like you guys are under the microscope a lot from gamers, especially I think on Twitter. How hard is it to be a reviewer, and what are your thoughts on things like media bias, the Xbox tax, things like that?
That's a pretty broad question. I think it's important for people to know that I don't really come from the gaming media space.
This is yes.
Yeah. That I think that's what separates me a lot from I think practically every gaming journalist. Is that I didn't get my start in games, and I never thought that I would ever cover games. I always covered just regular local crime and business and military stuff. And when I worked at the Washington Post, as you mentioned, I'm local here in the District, Maryland, Virginia area, and I've been here since 2015 working at the Washington Post. And at the Post, I was mostly doing social media and audience work. So I guess what you would call a community manager in the gaming space, right? I was basically a community manager for the Post. So so it's hard for me to say, to talk with any authority on what the gaming space is like. As I understand it, it's very low paid, thankless, and everyone hates you.
Yeah,
And
it's a tough job.
for a few reasons that are founded or are legitimate as well too. But I mean, that I say the same for journalism in general, right? Any criticism I might have about the gaming media space would extend to the overall general media space as well. Um, at least for me, it's hard to be a gaming space in the mainstream space because they laid off my whole team this past January, so it happened about a year ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
Um, yeah, mostly because they just don't really believe in investing in games coverage, which fine, that's fine. But I feel like you didn't need to invest more. You could have just left it as we were because we were doing just fine, and it's basically like we were picked on just to cut some money anywhere. But
Hmm.
and the Washington Post is about at least 250, 240 people, anyways, because we just gone through a round of buyouts. I don't plan on leaving. I plan to stay at the Washington Post. I like being one of the guys in the mainstream media covering games. I think that's interesting. I think I can make an impact here. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, I show up a lot often on like NPR newscasts or CBS News or wherever to talk about games. Then I think it's important for me to stay in this space. So
Hmm.
I have no inclination to want to work for a place like Kotaku or IGN or anything like that. I would rather just get a different career at that point. Um, because I work at the Washington Post. Like, where else am I gonna go? I guess the New York Times, but
Hmm.
I'm not really that interested in working in the New York Times, anyways. I don't want to work at CNN,
Hmm.
so I don't know where else to go other than possibly exploring the independent space, which is what you guys do, and which is what my good friend Colin does, and a lot of people do, and they find very varying degrees of success, and that's
Yeah.
something I'm obviously dabbling in. As you mentioned, I'm a co-host of Punching Up on Colin's network, Last Time Media, number one Patreon supported podcast. Just to put in a plug there, but so I'm
Shameless
kind of
plug. Yeah.
dabbling in the space and kind of getting used to it and seeing what that space is like too. So,
Yeah. Is this something where you might see yourself at some point maybe having your own YouTube channel where you would have
yeah,
like a
yeah,
weekly,
yeah. No, absolutely. Part of the problem of working at a place like the Washington Post is that I don't have the platform to be able to say whatever I want anytime I
Hmm.
want. I can't just like post an article because I have a take or whatever like that. Unfortunately, it's different from even like Kotaku, where Kotaku like they have editors, but mostly you can just kind of post your story, and which explains a lot of the kind of like the more lax editorial standards of at a place like Kotaku versus a place like the Washington Post. If I need to publish anything in the Washington Post, it needs to go through a whole bunch of editors,
Yeah.
and that's the whole process. So like like earlier, someone today asked me like, "Where is your story on the Insomniac leaks?" And it's I only get well, my I don't have editors that only cater to me. Unfortunately, I have editors that also have to edit stories by the media team or the politics team or the music team, or they're editing other shit on top of my stuff. So it's a whole procedural thing versus, if I worked at a place like Kotaku, then yeah, I'll be able to easily publish a post about the leaks and everything. But if I have my own YouTube channel as my own little project, then obviously I would have my own platform and my own tool set to be able to do something like that and just kind of expand my own and basically do what our friend Paul Tassi over at Forbes, contributor at Forbes, does too. And for Paul, his need to do it is greater than mine, because Paul is not a full-time employee of Forbes, so he is basically a freelancer that is also being a content creator. So if anything, I'm being greedy, being a full-time mainstream media employee, but also wanting to do stuff on the side. But to me, that's where a lot of the conversation and that's where a lot of the excitement is happening, anyways. And that's a great way to build trust with your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I asked the question about the Xbox tax. I'm sure you saw that going around on social media.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there? Because that's something, Gene, that's been it's been around for quite some time. The 10 years that I've been on gaming Twitter, if you will, that's always been a topic of conversation. It's always been. Yeah, it actually it goes back even further than 10 years ago on Twitter. I mean, I used to be a forum moderator on the GameSpot forums back. Oh, geez, probably about 21 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, if you're familiar with Greg, I think is it Kasavin or Kasavin?
Yeah. Now Supergiant Games. Right?
Yeah, Supergiant. Yeah, we actually had Greg on BRAP, this show, a couple years ago. But yeah, it was really cool because I was a forum moderator, and we had the ability to interact with Greg and some of the other who else was there at the time. Jeff Gertzman was there. I'm trying to think who else. There were some others. But Greg and Jeff are the ones that I remember the most. They're probably the ones I interacted with the most when I was a forum moderator. But even back then, 20-something years ago, it was this idea of media bias. If a certain platform released a first-party game, they didn't get favorable reviews. But people it seems like it's more recently, it's kind of been a talking point that's kind of gained a lot of momentum. And I personally don't believe in the tax. I file that away with people that think that the election was stolen. But what are your thoughts about that from a journalist perspective?
Yeah, I think the fact that we are always having forever, for decades, for centuries, not centuries, but over a century, we've been having debates about objectivity in journalism and bias in journalism and everything. Because it exists. It does exist. I think here's a little history lesson for a lot of people, including journalists who don't know. But objectivity in journalism didn't start because of some noble intention we have to chase the truth and we have to hear all sides and both sides or whatever like that. No, that's bullshit. That never came from any kind of noble cause or anything like that. The only reason why is because advertisers didn't want to advertise in a newspaper that was too political or too opinionated. That's it. Period.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why the only reason why objectivity in journalism as a rule exists is because they weren't getting enough money, so they needed to get more money. So now we always have to hear both sides, and that's the only reason why that exists. That's the main reason why the Game Awards didn't do anything about one layouts or two, and didn't say anything about Gaza, because what is the Game Awards powered on? Advertising, and what do companies want to be next to? Nothing controversial or political or anything. So that's the same reason. That's the same reason why that the Game Awards didn't say anything about anything, because they got to appease advertisers. And that's the same reason why with journalism. I feel like I'm ranting right now, but what I mean to say is that if there is a bias against Xbox, is because I believe that it does exist to a certain extent. I don't think it's systemic. I don't think IGN is like, oh yeah, well let's make sure that Xbox doesn't get blah blah blah. But I think we're now at a generation where there's been enough time where people don't remember when Xbox was dominant. So I mean, it went the other way for a while back in the early, like before 2010 and everything, and you would know because a lot of people favored Xbox 360 because Xbox
Yeah,
360 was the lead
yeah,
platform for a lot of games. So
yeah.
that's how a lot of review codes came in.
Hmm.
Me personally, I would have wanted Grand Theft Auto. I reviewed Grand Theft Auto 5 back in 2013,
Hmm.
but I would have wanted a PlayStation 3 version because I buy Grand Theft Auto to PlayStation. Grand Theft Auto made PlayStation, to a certain extent, obviously, right? So obviously with PS2.
Hmm.
But I got the Xbox 360 version because that was just like the lead platform holder at the time. So there's been a huge bias against PlayStation, and then the PS4 generation is long enough that now we have a whole generation of people who are just kind of leaning on PlayStation. So I think a lot of that bias. I mean, the bias existing with Sunset Overdrive. Sunset Overdrive, fantastic game. I think anyone who played that game will know that it's a classic,
Oh, I thought it was a great game.
wonderful
Yeah.
Insomniac game, right? But the Xbox tax happened in 2013 when nobody fucking paid attention to the Xbox One. So that was a tax. This tax isn't something that's systemic. The tax is something that is well, I mean, the Xbox kind of did that to themselves by launching the console terribly and basically, not marketing a game like Sunset Overdrive well, and like I look at Sunset Overdrive as a victim of the Xbox tax, and that this was back in 2013, 2014, right? So to me, this is not some kind of new thing. It just people being biased, and every once in a while that will leak out. But I don't think IGN has something against Xbox. I just think that sometimes they'll make a mistake because the guy is playing too much PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. I think it might be built in, and you can call it out when you see it. But like I feel sorry for Destin, who is like an Xbox guy, and then he has to be on IGN, and it has to deal with all this crap, or even McCaffrey too, right? So
Yeah, it's interesting. What you talked about the performance, the reveal of the Xbox, and kind of that the way that it's the way the kind of coverage it received as a result, right? Logic and I have talked about this, that we kind of see this in sports a little bit, and as being in the DMV. I mean, during the Dan Snyder era, yeah, the coverage of the Washington Redskins or Commanders wasn't very positive per se because of the on-field product, but also because of the way the franchise had been handled and mismanaged. And that was kind of similar to what we saw in 2000 and was it 2006 with the PlayStation 3 reveal. And when we had Colin on, he talked about how they primarily only covered the Xbox 360 generation because it was the the preferred platform by gamers.
exactly, that's Colin's era of being at IGN, right? The Xbox
Yeah.
360
Yep.
era.
Yeah, and he said it because I mean, you look at and you go back, it's interesting. You go back, very similar to what you see today with reviews. People say, "Oh, how come they're not reviewing the game for Xbox?" Well, because the PlayStation 5 is the top selling console right now. If you go back to the 360 generation, majority of the reviews were done on the 360.
I see Chad is confused about what I'm saying, but the latest guy player said it best. I think he's saying human beings are inherently biased, and bias sometimes shows up in their work. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that Ryan McCaffrey is one of the senior employees at IGN. If there's anything systemic going on, then it's probably because. But you have guys like Ryan McCaffrey and Destin who are institutional in a place like IGN, and they are definitely pro Xbox guys. Um, so I just think that whoever dealt with like that certain whoever dealt with covering a certain game and didn't put Xbox Series as a platform just fucked up, and it was just that person's bad. But I don't think that there's an Xbox I don't think there's a cabal, a conspiracy to hurt Xbox in any kind of way. It's just built in some way. Exactly what you said. Is that sometimes there might be a bias against a certain manager, or you're just kind of in that era where a brand isn't just doing that well. The Washington Post in the 2016 election, famously, a whole bunch of leftists fucking hated us because we ran he famously ran 17 negative articles on Bernie Sanders in one day. But what that doesn't say is that Bernie Sanders had a bad day the day before.
Hey,
So,
don't do that, DC.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a bad day the day before. So of course there's gonna be a bunch of negative stories because that was the negative news cycle for Bernie Sanders at the time. It's
Yeah.
not gonna be like we're gonna have 17 negative stories about Bernie Sanders every fucking day. It's just
Yeah.
that one day. And then half of those articles were even opinion articles too. And a lot of our opinion articles are biased against leftists and everything. So that's what happens.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you talking about this because it's something that, again, like I said, it's come up, and I don't disagree. Like, people do have inherent biases, but what I push back against is there's some kind of like secret cabal that's out to get Microsoft or Xbox.
Exactly. No, that's stupid.
Yeah, that's not. But yeah, I don't disagree with that. There's we all have inherent bias preferences. We just like human nature per se, but. But
someone
but
else
again,
in chat said, "Does this guy really say hearing both sides is a bad thing?" One, you need to clean your fucking ears. I didn't even say that. I said that. I said hearing both sides is not something that came on from some noble intention. That's not the case. That's just a fact. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing or a good thing or whatever. I'm not making a judgment on that. What I'm saying is that it didn't start with some kind of noble intention. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can take that as what you will, but hearing both sides isn't because we need to get to the objective truth. Hearing both sides is because we need to make as much money as we possibly can from advertisers. Again, which is why the Game Awards didn't do anything.
So, question in the chat. Hero Dead understands question for the panel. How can this hacked information, damn that chat scrolling, how can this hacked information negatively impact SIE for the medium to long term, knowing that 90% of PS gamers won't know anything about the revealed games? So I just want to throw that out there. Perhaps you can decide if we want to take that on now or hold it for.
Yeah, let's hold it for just a second, because I do want to I do want to get to the Insomniac ransomware hack and also rope Gene into that conversation, because out of that came some. There was some kind of funny, being the biggest one that I saw with the conversation. We're not going to cover this, but we'll get into that here in just a second.
I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on what Greg said too. So
yeah, I did see your tweet, by the way. It was kind of interesting. Like, I don't disagree with you with the coverage of it, but let me just I'm assuming most people here are aware of what happened, at least in the live chat. But for those who listen to the show later on, I'm just going to rattle off the article. This is I'm pulling this from GameIndustry.biz. So credit to them. And staff writer Sophie McEvoy. I apologize, so I'm not pronouncing the last name correctly. But a ransomware group has published 1.67 terabytes of content from the Insomniac games. They put up the data was on auction for about $2 million. With a week's deadline before releasing the stolen internal data, and obviously Sony's like, we're not paying that. We're not doing that. The 1.3 million files included Insomniac's release schedule up until 2035, detailed a bunch of announced games, and unfortunately personal employee details. I mean, that's terrible. I mean, as bad as the ransomware attack is, this is kind of the salt on the wound, if you will. It also featured the leak also featured a massive amount of information on the upcoming Wolverine title, including gameplay footage, level design. Gene, I think you mentioned this earlier. There was I guess an alpha build that was stolen that people are playing now. Is that? I think you said that before we went live. Is that correct?
Yeah, I saw clips of someone doing like the tutorial or something. It looked like someone was playing it or something. That's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And if not, it's still crazy that we're seeing all. I saw a bunch of clips, right? It's impossible. You can't open It's crazy that you can't open Twitter and not see the thing. Like, I wasn't looking for it at all. I wasn't looking for Wolverine or Logan or anything like that. I just opened fucking Twitter, and the first thing I saw was Wolverine gameplay. That's crazy, you know?
Yeah. So did I. That's kind of how I came across it. And then also, according to Polygon, documents related to unannounced projects by other PlayStation studios such as Guerrilla Games and Blueplay Games were also included in the leaked data. I haven't seen that. I've only seen the Insomniac stuff, and then also what came out of this too was the conversation that Sony was having internally about the ABK acquisition by Microsoft, the potential impact to its business as a result of that merger. There also something came out with I have to pull this one up, but this is new. I'm sorry, give me just a second here. I don't have that right now. There was something that came up about let me pull this up again. I had it up. No, that's not it. This is give me a second here, gentlemen. Part of the leak had to do with the amount of money that Sony spends on AAA games. One of the slides states that we have to make future AAA franchise games. Excuse me. AAA franchise games. I just lost my voice here for a second.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm just.
Oh my goodness!
Right now, I'm watching my friend capitalize on the titty meta on Twitch. No.
Hey, Logic, let me go get a drink of water real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So she's my friend Laura Lux. She's playing Fortnite, and game screen is just basically covering her torso. Like she's obviously wearing clothes. So stupid.
I guess I'll try and continue on the conversation from where BRAP left off. Although I'll be make sure I'll let the audience know I'll be a little bit impinged because I personally haven't paid attention to the leaked information. And I know people are arguing about the semantic of leak versus hack versus compromise versus exploit versus vulnerability, yada yada yada. I mean, in my mind, there was a hack that occurred as an actual cyber event, a cyber crime. The information that came out of that was exposed to the public, I would still prescribe as a leak. I have personally not looked at any of the leaked information because I don't personally believe that we who participate in the gaming conversation should follow that stuff or aggrandize it or further promote it or distribute it. Everybody has their own, rubric about how they feel about that. So I'm not informed of any of the information or coverage that, extensively covers the leak. But just in terms of, kind of what the impact is, right, to the business or to individual gamers or to the market, because that's kind of the three buckets that I generally try and talk about things on the show here. For you, Gene, personally, like as a gamer, are you? I mean, how do you feel you are personally impacted by the information? Does that lead you to be more interested in Insomniac games or the Sony games or PlayStation games or the PlayStation platform? Are you looking forward to things? Are you worried or concerned about what the output is in the future of the PlayStation portfolio?
I'm glad you prefaced that with me as a gamer because I'm an Insomniac fan. I love Insomniac games, right? I'm a huge Ratchet and Clank fan. I still think Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is the best PS5 game so far. So as a gamer and as an Insomniac fan, it does make me a little bit sad that they're basically. Well, I mean, I'm glad. First of all, I'm glad that that fucking news about Ratchet and Clank not being profitable is being debunked. Like this is why it's important that journalists cover this shit because some of you guys can't read fucking tables out there. and like Jesus Christ. Like this is why
reading comprehension is hard for a lot of people.
We're just a little bit less stupid than you fucking people are, out there, And again, I mentioned earlier that there's editors there, so like there would be a layer of like other eyeballs looking at this and being like, hey Gene, I think you saying that Ratchet and Clank lost $8 million when 1 year before it was released might be incorrect. You might have to hold this article and your take on this. So that's why journalism is important. But again, back to just being a fan. I'm glad that that Ratchet and Clank was profitable, and I'm glad that they're gonna go back to it again. But it does make me wish that they're not just a Ratchet and Clank and and Marvel Studio, because that's what they're going to be. It's just going to be X-Men games until fucking 2030, man. That's crazy. Like I haven't even thought about what kind of person I'll be in 2026 or 2025, you know? And we're not even going to get a Wolverine game in 2025. So that's a whole 2 years later, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know. As a fan, I'm not as a fan, I think this just speaks to AAA gaming in general. Like how long are we gonna go for this? Where it's like we're just gonna get games every 10 years now from our favorite AAA studios. Is that the move? You know that everyone's Rockstar in games now, and we're all gonna be waiting. You know. I don't know if I'm gonna be caring about Spider-Man 3 by 2029 or whatever. You know. That's such a long time later. I guess I will, but by the time it comes out, but like to me, I think the game would need to be look a little different too by 2030 or 2029. Spider-Man 3. I don't know.
So I think, my perspective on that notion that people are concerned that about Insomniac kind of sitting in one particular swim lane, right, in terms of genre or IP or anything. I definitely kind of understand that and empathize with it. I feel like that's par for the course in the PlayStation portfolio for what are the marquee studios, which fortunately or unfortunately, right, Insomniac is now one. But I mean, at the beginning of this generation, we had Jim Ryan say, that his marquee studios, right, the Sony Santa Monica's, the Naughty Dogs, the Sucker Punches, right, yeah, that they're not going to be going out doing like these ootsy cutesy projects. Like they're not going to do like Media Molecule stuff or small indie games. I don't suspect that any of those studios would put out something like a Hi-Fi Rush. That they're going to double down on the big money making, revenue generating, popular IPs. They may not be exactly those IPs, but they would be that scale of game. So it is kind of unfortunate. I mean, and I get that. I also, I guess in my mind, part of it also aligns to, I think BRAP and I had this conversation with studios simply being treated the same way that we treat employees in their career path, right? The analogy, because we do this in business, is that you have employees that are referred to as due course employees. And what that means is your high potential performers typically get rooted in lanes of things that they need to be exposed to, jobs that they have to do. They don't get to go off and do ootsy cutesy like projects and small things because they're being tagged for succession plans, etc. And by the same token, like business units where you're going to push a lot of your investment and where you want guarantees and you don't want high risk exposure. I completely understand, right, putting them into certain lanes and having them drive things, right? It's why you don't take, your high-end football players and have them play alternative positions, right? If you really need them in their wide receiver spot. So it's that, and it's also very similar to, what unfortunately Activision has done with basically converting every single one of its studios over to the Call of Duty pipeline. So that's unfortunate. And BRAP, just before I hand off to you, just address one little thing. Jason Ames saying I'm a little peeved. Game Logic accused me of crystal balling the unknown when he himself is uninformed on the contents of the leak. So first of all, if you want to call it an accusation of you crystal balling, that was in your response to your accusation of me holding out hope for Wolverine. Second of all, I'm not uninformed about the leak. If you listen to what I just said, what I said is I deliberately avoided not consuming information from the leak. That is way different than being uninformed.
You recognize that the leak is out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And so with, the interesting thing with the, with the leak is kind of been the coverage of the leak, Gene. Greg Miller coming out and saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to cover this. And I was kind of surprised because it is a news topic. It is a topic that people are talking about that's out there in the public. I do, Gene, I think you said this earlier, where I think you mentioned the profitability of what was it, Ratchet and Clank?
Ratchet and Clank, yeah.
Rift Apart, and there was some news stories trending or out there that were saying, oh, well, Ratchet and Clank wasn't even profitable. And then it's like, oh, no, update. And it's that's sometimes the thing that frustrates me about gaming journalism maybe there isn't those checks and balances per se, and it almost, to me at least, my interpretation of that is there's this rush to be first, and maybe that's not the case, but that's how it at least appears to me when you don't get the information correctly, maybe, or you don't wait to see. Okay, wait a minute. Let's see if there's anything more here. I mean, this, maybe this game was released, or this game is profitable, but anyhow. But
the rush to be first is reflected in a lot of these accounts that are pretending to be journalists, and I'm not even saying that as like a pejorative, but they're not journalists, but they are trying to be like journalists, or at least like fulfill the role that guy Nibble or whatever did or whatever, just breaking out or being the next discussing film, whatever. But they do that without really digesting the information or understanding the information, and that's why like a account like Warrior64 is good in that he's able to digest that information and move that out fast, but that takes some skill, and clearly not a lot of people have that.
Yeah, I would argue a lot of people don't have to comprehend information, but that's another conversation. But so Greg, I was surprised by Greg because he comes out. He's like, look, we're not gonna cover this. We're not doing that. But he did cover the GTA leak. But this
and everything, Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand this is a little bit different than GTA thing with its ransomware attack. I understand that, but why not cover it? Like it's out there. Yeah. It's being discussed. Why not?
So my take on Greg. Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
Why not put like a journalistic lens on this, and do some more digging and present a more, I guess, cohesive news story. Something that's that has a little more thought to it than kind of what I've been reading on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, I think Greg, and they clarified this today too in their podcast today. And Greg wasn't on there, but it was Tim Geddes and Blessing. But I think Greg also believes this too. But they clarified that Kind of Funny is not a journalism program. They are not journalists. They don't call themselves journalists. They might do acts of journalism sometimes, right? And many people do. Even Nibble did that every once in a while. Even Warrior64, I would consider doing acts of journalism sometimes, but he is not a journalism org, and Greg doesn't consider himself a journalist, and I think that's really important, and that's something that a lot of people, even in the political news space, don't seem to get right. But Greg Miller is in the same space as Tucker Carlson, basically. I know.
I was just about to say that. When you said political space, I'm like, yeah, I don't consider Hannity. I don't consider Tucker Carlson. I don't consider God, who else? I can't think
Rachel
of the other
Maddow.
Rachel Maddow. I don't consider them as
Don Lemon over at CNN.
Yeah, they're not pundits.
They're pundits. They're entertainers. They're just like this podcast. They're just filling up airspace so you can hear people talk, and there's something to think about throughout the day. That's basically what it is, and that's what Kind of Funny is. That's what Last Stand Media is. That's not what I do at the Washington Post, but that is what I do. What I'm doing right here, right now. That's what I do on a lot of other podcasts. But so. Greg saying that he's not a journalist absolves him of having any kind of responsibility. And I guess it's kind of a hack in itself that he doesn't have to do it because he can be as opinionated as he wants and whatever. But I mean, that's the interesting thing about the gaming media space is that, like, again, not a lot of people come from straight journalism background. It's funny because Greg actually did go to journalism school. But he hasn't been able to use it that much, and he clearly doesn't really seem to want to. But a lot of the gaming journalists don't really come from that space. You hear a lot of gaming journalists speak out about Gaza, right, and the humanitarian effort there. I can't say any of that shit. If I say that, I am fired, and I would no longer be Gene Park of the Washington Post. I'm just Gene Park. An unemployed dude that has nowhere to go in DC. That will be what happened to me if I said anything about Gaza whatsoever.
So Gene, if I was to ask you on the show, Gene, what are your thoughts about what's happening in Gaza? You replied, Washington Post hears this. They're like, Gene, you need to come in the office. We're gonna have an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah,
pack your
yeah.
bags.
If you ask me what do I think about should there be a ceasefire in Gaza or not,
Yeah.
the only thing I can say is, wow, okay, well, that is happening, and there is a debate about that. Isn't that interesting? That
Can
is
you
the
comment
most
on
I can
Trump?
say.
Is that
Huh?
can you comment on Trump being banned from the ballot in Colorado? Is that something you can talk about? Not
Yeah,
that I
see, I
want to
can't
talk
even
about
say
that,
anything
but
with that. Yeah, I'll be like,
yeah,
wow, well, that
yeah,
happened in South Carolina or South Carolina or
yeah,
Colorado or
yeah,
wherever,
yeah. Interesting.
That's
Okay.
it. That's the extent of it, But a lot of folks in the games media space, are again asking the Game Awards and asking Jeff Keighley to say something about Gaza, and that is just something that seriously, I've had a lot of peers in the mainstream media space lose their jobs or quit. People have left the New York Times because they felt like they need to say something about Gaza.
I could say,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and they can't say it at New York Times because they'll get fired, and people have gotten fired. That's it. So I operate in a completely different rule set than a lot of the people pretty much in the gaming media space. I guess other than Jason Schreier, who works on Bloomberg, right?
Bloomberg,
That's about
yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I didn't listen to the show today. I didn't catch a show, but that's kind of an interesting response. Oh, you know what? I'm not really a journalist. I don't have to cover it or whatever. But it just again, but he's covered other things, and that was kind of the head scratcher for me. It's like, well, wait a minute, you
Yeah,
covered these other leaks,
and
I don't
and one
think
tweet
there's
thread
anything.
I think kind of said it is that it's and they do admit it. It's because they're biased because there is a PlayStation bias there because they have friends at Insomniac. They love Insomniac. They feel like they know people at Insomniac. So that's
They have
their
relationships.
bias.
Okay, that makes sense.
Their relationships. So. And to their credit, they're admitting that, which is great. I think at the very least, if you can do that, then that's good.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. If you're admitting it up front, hey, to my listeners, look, I had these relationships with developers at Insomniac, personal relationships. I know some people, whatever the case is, I can certainly appreciate that.
But then it goes to show that there's like a race aspect or like a ethnicity aspect because we can't really be friends with anyone at Capcom because none of us really speak Japanese and we don't live in Japan and we're not hanging out with them all the time. So that's why there's a disconnect and there's a kind of a dehumanization aspect when we look at how a ransomware is affecting Capcom versus Insomniac. The folks at Capcom are just as cool and just as chill as anybody at Insomnia. It's just that we can't speak the same fucking language. That's it. That's the only thing separating them. So it is. So it is interesting that they admitted their bias. But yeah, that's what it is. That they're admitting that they're friends with folks at Insomniac. So that's why they feel like they don't want to be party to that. But again, and as a lot of people have said, the information is out there, so we can't. It'd be stupid of me to sit here and say, well, you know what, I'm not going to talk about anything about the Insomnia leaks because they were stolen, right?
Yeah.
When it would be stupid when everyone in chat and you guys out here know exactly what's going on in the leaks. So what does that make me? Useless then, at a certain point,
I guess.
That's the information economy that we live in. It's cruel. Yeah. As I tweeted, I have a lot of sympathy for the devs who are affected by this, but the information ecosystem has no sympathy. It doesn't feel anything for you. What it's going to do is just have this information out there. That's it.
I have to wonder if that the currency that you speak of also leads to things like, well, in my opinion, I think it does lead to things like misinformation, disinformation. I mean, I've seen that just come out of the leaks, the release leaks, where you have people who don't have enough context to be making, I think, any real accurate analysis of financials, like PlayStation. That's been something that's been that's a conversation's been having, that's been being had on social media and other YouTube shows or gaming shows on YouTube, and because out of this leak, that there was some information that came out about the cost of AAA development, sustainable budgets, and people are saying, well, it's this is a Sony issue, and it's like, no, that's not the case. Like, if you guys not been paying attention, like Jeff Grubb talked about this. We had him on, maybe not the last time we had him on, but we talked about the and Sean Layden's talked about this quite a bit too.
Sean,
post
Sean
leaving.
Sean was the biggest, the biggest person who was waving those flags back in the day.
Yeah. I remember Sean saying, "Hey, look, like it's not really." I think he's argued it's not sustainable. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said, look, it's challenging. And if you look at the behavior of the other third-party publishers who are making AAA games, I think this is a big reason why they have diversified their portfolio. It's like, you look what EA's doing. They're not just doing big AAA titles. You look at what Take-Two has done. Even Sony. I mean, this isn't just a Sony issue per se. And I guess my frustration is that people are reading these things. Oh, it's a Sony issue. It's like, no, it's not. It's not just a Sony issue. It's not only Sony. It's the just AAA space, the development space, where these games cost. I mean, we just talked about Capcom, Gene. What was the CEO of Capcom this past summer said? We're at a point where games should be like $100 now. AAA games.
Yeah.
That's
why That's why I thought the whole controversy over games being $70 is a little short-sighted, because I'm like, these companies don't want to just charge you $70. They want to charge us $80. They think games should be $100 by now. That's what it is, So $70 is not a premium. It's still short of what they want to charge us,
Yeah, and that's something that came about of the leaked documents that maybe Sony's looking at increasing the prices of games to $80 to $100, and people are losing.
You see, there was information that Spider-Man 3 was going to be cut up into 2 parts, that are going to be sold at $60, $70 each or $50 each or whatever.
Yeah, $100 games. And look, I mean, I think I don't begrudge anyone who doesn't want to pay $100 for a game. That's fair. Like, if that's not for you, that's not for you, and I get it. But I also think there's an addressable market that I'll pay $100 games. I want those premium experiences. The one thing that we talk about this particular point on this show quite a bit is that we often feel like, at least I do. I don't know if you do, Game Logic, but I often feel like gamers tend to treat the video games differently than other consumer products. Like we have instances of luxury items that are targeted for specific demographic. That's willing to pay those high. Gene, we see this every day living in DC, right? It's not cheap living here. And people pay premium to leave.
City center,
Yeah, people pay premium to live in DC. But no one is yelling at well, maybe some people are, but no one's yelling at people to make housing affordable in Georgetown. It's just not. But I feel like, and when we had Colin on the show, we talked about this, like this idea of AAA games, but not wanting to pay for those AAA experiences. And I think what Colin said, like gamers kind of need to put their money where their mouth is if they want those kinds of experiences. And I don't know if those were exact quotes, but I think he said something to that effect. I'd have to go back and listen to the show again. But we were talking about this idea where gamers kind of don't want to pay for AAA content. Or don't understand sometimes that, if a game is going to be $100, it may not be for you. It may be for something else. It may be for another consumer who's willing to pay those premium price points for a high-end, gaming experience. We see this, again, with other consumer products. I just don't know why gamers think like these things don't apply to video games per se.
Right. You and I have talked about it. I told you. I mean, there's because we had a inflection point in the market and in the industry, right, in the span of time from 2005 to 2023, that broke the historical norm of the timeline along which we had normally seen that $10 price increment raise in games, and that led to a demographic coming into the space, and having access to new games. At a as kind of socioeconomic factors caught up, right, while game prices remain static, and that allowed an influx of people into the space that are in the space now but not willing to bear the price of any increase in games. And concurrently with their arrival, right? Then you had new games being made available for an unprecedented low cost of access, right? In the terms of the Game Pass subscription model. So we have, what is now, what I keep saying is not a console war, but it's a class war, right? Between people who want game prices to remain static, so it doesn't have any impact on their current socioeconomic status, versus those who are willing to pay the increasing cost for a luxury product in order to keep the quality high, and to not be priced out of the market. And it's just like I referred to the Broken Silicon podcast, right? And the Moore's Law guys who came up with a quote about GPU, what was going on with GPU pricing, but I think is applicable to games, which is, and over there it's past tense, right? What those guys mentioned is, look, you had people who came into the market at the time when, there were $500 GPUs, budget GPUs. Those people have now been priced out of the market and they're angry. Right?
Yeah.
And people are looking at, holding back the reins on the same thing occurring in the gaming market.
Yeah, it's why people are holding on to their 1060 cards, which is exactly what I'm doing. I still have a 1060 card, but because a lot of people entered into the market space around 2016, 2017 at that price point. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say this is, my gaming history goes back 40 something years. I remember paying $50 for video games in 1988. And Gene, I think you mentioned that, gaming where it is today is, we're actually, paying less. I forget what you said. Something. Did you say we're paying less than?
We are paying less than. Someone in chat says I'm out if I'm spending $100 on video games. Man, I spent $100 on Super Street Fighter 2 for Super Nintendo when I was 16 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So that didn't take me out. So I call cap. First of all, if you want the game enough, you're going to pay $100. It doesn't matter. That's it.
Well, if
Grand Theft Auto 6 was $100, we're all paying $100 for it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean we were paying $50 for games in 1988. If you do the math, that's the equivalent of paying $128 today for a video game. And this is 1988. We were paying $50 for video games back in 1988. That's the equivalent of paying $128.59 to be accurate to the penny. To the cents here in 2023. So, I mean, if you there was an article, Game Industry Biz actually did this article where if you look at the cost of video games when you adjust for, like you do the math back, you adjust for inflation, we're actually paying less money for AAA games than we did back in the early 80s, 90s, and so forth. And actually, I think at the start of this generation, I think we were paying. The last generation was $60. I think we're paying even slightly less when you adjust for inflation at $70 than we were at the start of last generation for AAA games. But
I mean, like I said, I've been disagreeing with Colin with that rate with that hypothesis the whole time, just because I get and agree with the math. I'll be the first person from an economic standpoint, from a financial standpoint, that the math is sound. However, what I will always say is, but what you have to look at is the apparent impact to the customer, to the consumer, and no one thinks in terms of, the current impingement that I'm feeling is okay because it's the historical norm of inflation. People who are impinged from and can't afford to buy brand new houses now don't pay attention to the fact that, well, it's because inflation. If you go back and look at history, right, it's all about, right, is $10 extra coming out of my current budget of disposable income.
And I don't disagree with that. I mean, like, and that was actually part of, Game Industry Biz, that article that I'm citing here, where they're doing the math, and they actually do say that, hey, look, but in terms of the consumer's only looking at that. I'm paying $10 more. And I get that.
And player mentioned that earlier in the chat, but he says inflation hasn't been kept up with, wages haven't kept up with inflation, and that's true too. That's exactly why. We at the Washington Post went on strike for a day a week or two ago because the wages that we're getting, the salaries that we're getting from Jeff Bezos himself, it's still not enough to pay for the cost of living here in DC.
Yeah, but my difference of opinion with that is that's for certain occupations and for certain sectors of the market, right? I definitely agree with it's unfortunate that it's the case, so I'm not rah-rahing and pom-pomming it, But I completely agree with the notion that we are in a rich session right now, where we have certain socioeconomic strata that are not as negatively impinged, right, by a lot of the financial contractionary dynamics that we're seeing, and some people are making out good. I mean, I hate to say it. It's not a nice thing to say.
True. No, it's
But-
true.
but-
Anyone around the ad market right now is suffering. You know, including content creators, including media folks.
People in STEM tracks. I hate to say it, probably. I mean, if you were watching your career and skating in the right direction, you may have made out during the pandemic, and you certainly made out from a simple quality of life perspective. Like I was just thinking today. I mean, it's even ridiculous, and I even have limitations, right, with some of the work that I do requiring me to be on site. But my world right now is a radically different world than what it was 10 years ago, and that's a world that is in many cases more beneficial to my quality of life. And at the same time, I've experienced salary increases. So, I mean, I think you have to, in my mind, that type of statement has to be looked at the economy in aggregate. And like I said, there's some people who are definitely suffering more than others. But there are some people, and again, these are the dynamics that we see playing out in the market, because in the gaming market, because you have people who, like I said, may have experienced an upswing, from the pandemic and from some of the changes and from salary increases, who again are probably aligned with the demographic of people who are okay with gaming price increases, right, and others who are not.
And to Jason Ames's point in chat, he says, Sony planning to price a hike to games years in advance is what stings. Regardless of economic problems improving or not, Sony has decided it wants to squeeze its customers more. I think he brings up an interesting point, and it's something that these leaks show. And I think it's been evident in the way PlayStation has been acting in the last few years, in that they are training the audience to pay more. They are training the audience to think of PlayStation as more of what you said, Enrique, as a luxury brand. That they want gamers to think of PlayStation as not as
reminds you of
not
Apple,
even
right,
as like not even Adidas, but like closer not maybe a Nike, but closer to like a Louis Vuitton.
I've always argued that a bit recently. I've said that they're acting very Apple-esque right now.
Yeah, especially with the whole family of items and products that they have, with the fucking Pulse earbuds and the PlayStation Portal and everything.
The Portal,
like the PlayStation Portal, you cannot come up with a more luxury item like minded product, but it's still priced pretty well at $200. But if you have a PlayStation Portal, at that point you have a Louis Vuitton cape, basically.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree. That's I mean, I consider Louis Vuitton in a higher strata of fashion, right, with a lot of cheaper products being developed. But my thing is that, but I mean, yes, maybe they are. Apple has done the same thing, and there used to be a lot of grousing about the pricing of Apple products.
Right, yeah, now we're all spending 4 figures on fucking phones. That's crazy. But
I mean,
when the iPhone 10 was charged at $1,000, remember how our brains broke?
I remember that.
Yeah,
But you don't hear that grousing as much anymore.
No,
now
you don't hear anymore at all. Yeah.
I mean you still hear it, but I just don't think it at the volume. But now that market has a slightly different dynamic where, and these are things that I don't agree with. For instance, Google got rid of its Nexus program, where we had an era of like the mid-grade phone, which was a $500 phone that would still sometimes have the high-end processor that some of the flagships would, or are very close to it. But then those vendors started charging near Apple, right, near iPhone prices, and now they created a new class, right, with the foldable, where they charge even more. So that's a weird like dynamic. But I think some of the past historical precedents is we see is kind of the same. So maybe Sony is training its incoming customers to be accustomed to paying higher prices. And again, I'm not making a judgment call whether or not that's right or wrong. But what I will say is, A, we've seen that in other markets, but also B, maybe a company would do that when if they're looking at the same historical effect that I just talked about, which was you had an influx of customer who is used to staying at the price hovering at $60 for 18 years, whereas we have normally seen a $10 uptick in price along the 10 to 12-year point. And so now there's kind of a retraining that they're trying to do to get people reaccustomed right to that up level on threshold.
That's exactly what I was thinking about Logic when you said about the whole generation trained on something. I'm like, yeah, I think that's what Sony is trying to do again, is that they're trying to they recognize that, and I think they're trying to kind of correct that. Whereas Xbox is going the opposite way, and they're like, well, you subscribe to this, and we just get you just get whatever games,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was wondering too, like as I was reading, the 80, the 70, 80 or $100, increases that they're maybe potentially considering. Like I have to imagine it's not just them, that it's probably the other third party publishers. I mean, and I thought of that because of what the CEO of Capcom said.
Well, if you think for a minute, Strauss Zelnick. That was sat in his office, and had a discussion with somebody about charging $100 for a game. I got some land in Peoria to sell fruit to you.
Yeah, I see. Dorian Gray says the issue for me isn't paying more; it's the product isn't worth it most of the time. I mean, look, that's like values in the eye of the beholder. If you don't value those things, I won't begrudge you for that. But there are going to be people that value those experiences because they are tangible differences between AAA gaming experiences versus AA versus indies. You could see that. Whether or not you think that's worth it, that's fair. It's a fair conversation. Again, everyone's going to see value different, but they are tangible difference between AAA, AA, and indies, and they're priced based on those tangible differences. And I talked about those tiers earlier. But I don't. I agree with you, Logic and G. If it's not just Sony, if they shift, the industry is going to shift. And the industry actually shifted before Sony actually announced. Remember, at the start of this generation, it was Activision. Who else was announcing the $70 games?
Well, going back to my historical lesson, right? Who shifted the industry last time? Guess who was the first to hop to $60 games? Maybe the company that put their console out a year early in the generation in order to get a head start on PlayStation.
Oh, it was Xbox. Yeah.
So remember when Xbox 360 came out, they were the ones who jumped the price rate to $60 in their generation.
Interesting. I totally forgot that.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. Yeah, and
actually, I don't even remember that. I couldn't even tell you that I forgot it. I don't even remember that happening. That's crazy.
And Gene, this is the thing that I mentioned constantly, right? That you just brought up, and I talked about this when I did some freelance work for VentureBeat, and I had an opportunity to sit in on some panels from their summer game event. I can't remember what it's called, but listening to a lot of
Games Beat or whatever.
Yep. Listening to a lot of I got a chance to sit in on some panels where there were collections of investment guys there. And one of the things they talked about is they put out information like this that seems financially impacting to consumers, to gamers. And when it's met with adversity, what they have learned from free to play, from all these other things that they've done, is that eventually gamers forget, and then they just reintroduce it and gamers go on about their business. So right, when these price hikes increase, there's a lot of grousing, right? And then people adjust, and then the market just moves on. Mm-hmm. So this whole notion that gamer Twitter throwing up a red flag is somehow going to push back the tide, right? No. Of the commercial, like that's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. Gamer Twitter is powerless. The gamer Twitter has nothing going on other than a couple of blue checks, including me getting $8 more a month. I mean, I pay for Twitter too, so I'm not gonna. I am also in the glass house as well, but
yeah, it's how the market responds.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I know that gaming Twitter bait is, or engagement Twitter bait is not even that lucrative, because I don't get that much money. It's not worth it to make yourself look like an ass every single month.
Well, for some people it is. I think
for some people it is. I guess getting $24 extra this November was good, but now everyone knows that that your son hates you or something. I don't know.
No, it's I hate. Look, I don't, and I've said this before. People will say, "Oh, BRAP, you're just advocating for more for for companies to charge us more. You're advocating for corporations to make more money. You want to, and I'm not. Look, I don't want to pay more for stuff. I'm not, but I also understand there's
nobody wants to do it.
Yeah, nobody does. Like, but there's a reality. It's like
let's not say nobody.
What's that?
Well, I mean, Strauss Zelnick obviously is.
Well, yeah, Strauss. Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I mean, and maybe I'll agree to a certain.
I think I know where you're going with this logic.
that I don't want to pay higher prices, right? But I will pay higher prices if I have to, and I will pay higher prices. I say this, but look, I'm just going to say it because I'm going to be honest and transparent. I've tried to do this before, and I get a lot of hate from the chat, and that's fine. Sometimes I'm fine paying for a higher price product when that separates me, right, from other people who aren't or who can't, right? I pay for where I live because I don't want to live in a neighborhood where people park their cars on the front yard, right? That's just me. You buy high end stuff, right? Even UHD Blu-rays, right? You buy UHD Blu-rays because you want a premium high end experience. You don't buy Jordans based on you holding out that Nike's going to hold the price rate for the next 18 years. You pay the higher price for the Jordans because that's the product you want. And I hate to say it, but
I spent $450 on my Jordans last year.
What? You spent how much? What?
$450 on my Jordans last year. Yeah.
But see, here's the thing, and this is where I talk about why what puzzles me about consumers and how they, for some reason in gaming, tend to treat gaming differently. You just said, Gene, you paid $450 for a pair of shoes.
That's a whole console. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, I wouldn't do that. But again, I'm not going to shout at Nike for selling a $450 pair of shoes to Gene Park because clearly I'm not the demographic for that, and that's okay.
And you and I just had this conversation today, right?
Yeah.
I just built a box with an RTX 4080, right? But you said, hey, I'm a PC gamer. I love PC gaming, but I'm not that down bad, right? That hard up, right? I'm not that hardcore. I shouldn't say hardcore. The point is, it's
easier logic.
I mean, look. Okay, let me give some reference to you. You bought
horny for right now.
you bought a car, right? Yeah. That is in a class of vehicle that like I'm not going to pay for, right? Just where I am now, like your car.
I bought a car. Or Gene bought a car. Are you talking about me? Okay.
You bought a car. Yeah.
Well,
a car for me is conveyance, and I had my years where I bought my phallic representations. Right, and now I don't need that. Right, I'm fine being a suburban dad, soccer dad.
Are you saying the SUV I bought is a phallic representation?
Well, midlife crisis. I mean, whatever you want to call it. We're down with euphemisms tonight, so pick a label.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, but I mean, what your point is like, look, different people have different thresholds for luxury products they're willing to buy. I don't. The Disney World thing you and I have talked about, we don't want to do that. That's not it for us, right? So, but other people will, So, people should let the market go ahead and be what the market is.
I mean, I fuck with Logic's energy. One, because all you guys are just meaning me, especially the chat right now. But if you guys don't know, I am someone who does enjoy like luxury goods, luxury like items. I bring up Louis Vuitton because I am like a huge Louis Vuitton like fanatic. Like I have I bought a bunch of their shoes. I have a pair of Louis Vuitton flip flops that cost $1,000. So that's how deep it goes.
Yeah, I think the most I've ever paid for a pair of like dress shoes. I bought a pair of Ferragamos. That might be the most I've ever paid.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pair of Ferragamos too, and that also cost $1,000.
Did you show them recently?
I did show it recently, yeah. But flip flops, though, I'm talking about $1,000 flip flops.
That's crazy.
Even I think that's ridiculous, but I still bought it.
See, Gene, I couldn't spend $1,000 on flip flops. But hey, I mean, but again, that goes to like I'm not the demographic that Louis Vuitton's targeting.
Exactly, and it goes to show to Logic's point. Like, because I lived in Hawaii for 8 years, right? And we all wear flip-flops, or we call them slippers in Hawaii, right? So to Logic's point, to differentiate myself against the other flip-flop wearing people, air-toed people, I needed a pair of flip-flops that were $1,000, so I can be elite in that crowd. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, we all have our things. Like I was one of those people who got to those point. I always wore sunglasses, right, when I work on, and I used to buy like the little cheapy ones, and I was constantly losing them. So I hit a point where I could afford it, and I said, from now on, I'm buying expensive sunglasses, right, to teach myself to not be a dumbass, right, and constantly misplace my sunglasses. So now I only wear expensive sunglasses. So everybody's got
What
their
kind of
thresholds for
sunglasses,
stuff.
Logic?
So well, I used to, and I'm not saying they're good. I used to buy
You broke up
Oakley's
there.
are not Oakley's, not Oakley's. Under Armour.
Ray-Bans?
Under Armour. So they're not incredibly. Those aren't incredibly expensive.
I thought you said Ray-Bans.
Yeah, I used to buy Ray-Bans in my younger years. That was my like first jump. Then I shifted to Oakley's, and now I buy Under Armour because I don't want to spend as much as I was spending on Oakley's. But they're slightly more expensive. They're more expensive than like your gas station sunglasses, which what I used to buy when I didn't make any money at all. But my point is, just to dovetail with what you're and converge with what you're saying, which is, different people have different, it's a whole over under thing of what people are willing to pay for. What I don't get is I don't get you being angry at me, right? Because I'm willing to pay for $70 games, but you don't want.
Yeah. Well, that's my point. Like
Chris' Steakhouse, because I don't like the prices that they're charging.
Yeah, I do like Ruth Chris Steakhouse, by the way.
Yeah, I like Ruth Chris too. Yeah, I eat there all the time.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Gene. I miss working in DC. I used to eat. Good times. Great culinary experience.
Yeah, a lot of good steakhouses here.
Yeah, great restaurants. I love it. I mean, yeah. Anyhow, but that's my point. Like these things, as we discuss these examples and with other consumer products, these things to also apply to video games. So. I have a couple super chats
also
here.
Also, to your point about 4K UHD, the DVDs, you're paying a premium for that, right? Yeah. But then you also realize these are re-releases of movies. It's a new version of The Matrix or whatever like that, being charged at $40. But then you don't hear these conversations that we in the gaming space have in the movie space, where they're like, I can't believe they're charging $40 for a Midsummer on 4K UHD. That's crazy. The movie just came out 2 years ago, whereas in here we can't re-release a new version of a game without it being a whole thing. That's why I defended The Last of Us Part 1 re-release last year, because I was like, I see no problem with this.
Or Gene, to your point, those Jordans, those re-releases.
That's exactly what it was. It was a re-release of a Jordan, and that's why it was so expensive.
That's Louis Vuitton sneakers are $1,300, bro.
I think Gene.
I thought I was sponsored with my freaking Jordans. I guess I need to step up my game.
Me too. I'm like, I got Jordan 1s, and I got a couple Nike Air Maxes, but no, I don't have anything on the level of Louis Vuitton, but no, I mean it's interesting. It's an interesting phenomena that in gaming where you to your point, Gene, like where you see these conversations, but I would imagine these people aren't having these conversations with other like the re-releases of movies going to 4K.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes no sense. And then they get extra movie? No, it's the same movie. It just looks a little better. That's exactly what The Last of Us Part 1 was. But then we got new accessibility options and everything. So it's. I don't understand what consumers want things to be priced at, because it does. The pricing is all fucked up. I mean, look at God of War Valhalla. Like that's a fucked up pricing. Free for something that good. That's crazy.
I haven't played that.
For that one.
I haven't played that yet, Gene. But I've actually talked to some. No, but I've heard I've talked to a couple people that played it, and they are ranting and raving about it, and saying you need to play this. And everyone I've talked to said I would have happily paid for this.
Yeah, believe the hype. I was doubting it. I was like, come on, it can't be that good. And then I played it, and I was like, yeah, this could have been easily a $40 game if you could have sold it that much. Wow. It could have. Yeah, you could have just sold this as a whole different game, and it would have been fine. That's how good it was. But then they just gave it up for free. Why? I mean, obviously we know now from the leaks that God of War Ragnarok sold like what 15 million or something. Did really well. So that's a lot of good free content going out to millions of people out there. But they could have made that money back. And it's more substantial, I think, than what we seem to be getting in The Last of Us Part 2 remaster, which is $10 a month next month. We get a roguelite, but no story. Whereas in Valhalla, we get a roguelite on top of like new story content, and like that adds to the lore. That's crazy.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, I know the kind of funny guys mentioned it, I think this week or last week, but we also shouldn't sleep on that. A lot of times these remasters and remakes come out, and they have tons of accessibility features that just make them playable by a whole different,
Yeah, by a whole different audience. I love that.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I love Sony's recent obsession with adding slow-mo options to their games. I fucking love slow-mo like tech and like Max Payne, The Matrix, all that stuff. So I think it's so fucking cool that I can just play The Last of Us and run around as Ellie, basically being Neo and just like headshotting everybody in slow motion. I think that's just so fucking cool.
Yeah. Speaking of Max Payne, the voice actor just passed away. That happened this week.
Yeah.
I don't know if yeah. Let me grab these super chats here before we move on to the next topic. Gene, I'm not gonna lie. I'm thinking about these Louis Vuittons. I think in my early 30s, I probably would have purchased a pair.
That's exactly what I did in my early 30s. I bought a pair of expensive flip flops for no reason, but you know what? The girls loved it, so that's all that mattered.
There you go.
It did the work I hired him to do.
All right, Miles with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Miles, for the super chat. Says my biggest problem with the leaks is we have no context with them and have no idea if these are just ideas, pitches to management, and could have been scrapped. I don't disagree with that, Miles. I think that's kind of been my frustration a little bit with people trying to extrapolate and come to conclusions with information without having little context. Also, Miles with another $5 super chat says, also, if you've seen the doc that people are using to say Sony is raising prices in 2027, nowhere does it say they're planning to raise prices. Yes, that's true. They're not saying it's definitively going to happen, but it's a conversation that's happening. But I would imagine that, in terms of pricing, I would imagine, Logic, that this isn't uncommon for businesses to talk about their pricing strategies. Where, hey, like, let's look at what our pricing might look like, down the road, as we try to project, growth and things like that. I mean, would you say that's a fair, would you say it's a fair statement, Logic? Excuse me. Did we lose Logic?
He disconnected or something? I don't know. I saw him in the chat saying that the stream was stuttering, and then now he's just gone.
Oh. Well, maybe we lost them.
Yeah.
All right.
What was the question again?
Just that, what Miles had mentioned, that the leaked document showed Sony discussing raising prices, but they didn't say definitively that's going to happen. And,
I feel like it'll be fine to I mean that is the frustrating thing that we're just seeing leaked documents without any context and without any kind of like, oh, this is just a suggestion, or this is just for planning. That's why I wouldn't take too much stock into Spider-Man 3 being split up into two parts, which is a crazy idea. But I think that's the point of meetings and
brainstorming
presentations like this.
Yeah,
brainstorming like this. Yeah, like you want to throw out your craziest ideas and start from there. So I don't think we should be using that as a barometer for that. Still, the fact that it's a realm of possibility, I think again points back to what we were speaking about earlier in the conversation about how a lot of people just really want to just raise the prices on these games.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what Logic was saying, Strauss Zelnick would probably happily jump at the opportunity to do that, but I would imagine so would every other publisher as well. All right, I do want to move on to Bobby Kotick, and hopefully Logic. I don't know if he's having issues on his end, but we did find out today that that Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick will be stepping down officially December 29th. And Microsoft has not, they have not appointed a direct replacement. And what they're going to do is have, they're rolling the current suite of Activision Blizzard executives, which include Blizzard President Mike Ibarra, who was at Microsoft, worked under Phil Spencer for some time, Activision Publishing President Rob Kotick, and Activision Blizzard Vice Chair Thomas Tipple. And these individuals will, under Microsoft's Game Content Studios, will report to Microsoft Game Content and Studios President Matt Booty. So Bobby Kotick is he's leaving a rich man, Gene. That much we know. He's cashing out, and what do he became kind of a I guess villain might be I don't know if villain's the right word to use, but he was somebody.
I mean, he totally became a villain.
What's that?
Totally become a villain. He became like the Darth Vader of the games industry.
Yeah, I don't like the word villain, but
like people even like Darth Vader. So like Darth Vader is such an outdated like term. I guess Voldemort. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I mean he became somebody who became the symbol of everything that was bad at Activision in terms of culture and things we heard about harassment. Him threatening employees. So when I read the articles today and seeing some of the reaction, a lot of people on Twitter were like, "Thank goodness he's leaving," but he's leaving a rich man. And I was thinking about like, what is his? I look at his legacy in two parts, but before I talk about how I view his legacy, I do want to ask you, Gene, how are you going to look at his legacy? As CEO of Activision, because he was there he's one of the longest tenures. Logic brought this up earlier today. One of the longest tenured CEOs in the U.S.
in games in general. He founded Activision. It's his baby. So it was always going to be the case that he was going to make out rich, because he became rich a long time ago. It was always secure. So this is just his way of just getting out of the business, I guess. His legacy is that he made Call of Duty into the mega thing that it is today. I think at least in terms of the business sense, all of the decisions around Call of Duty, and all of the studios basically being folded into Call of Duty being only a Call of Duty studio. That's all him. So I think that in and of itself is, his legacy. Part of his legacy is ballooning the budgets. Call of Duty games are so expensive, and going back to our conversation about budgets and AAA games. I don't know. Maybe it's a hot take, but I don't think I need games to look this good. like to be quite honest, I don't think. I think we're spending money in the wrong spaces. And one of the most interesting things about the thing in the Insomniac leak is that hey, Spider-Man 2 is triple our budget, but can we see that it's triple the budget? And to answer the question, no, I don't think that Spider-Man 2 looked like it was $300 million. To be quite honest,
I'm not a game developer, but you think about Hollywood, and the amount of money Hollywood spends on blockbusters. AAA games is exceeding that. And I don't know if Logic's back. Maybe you could speak to this a little bit. But yeah, I didn't look at Spider-Man 2 and think, oh, this is a $300 million game.
Yeah,
I did think it looked great. I thought it was a great looking game.
Yeah. It's still obvious to look better than Spider-Man 2018. I'm not saying that there were no differences. Yeah. That's obviously definitely not what I'm saying. But I just don't think that there were 3 times the differences. Based
on reusing the past technology, right? Because they're running the game on the same engine. There's a ton of from the ground up standing start engineering work that just didn't have to be done. Leaving them free, right, to work on content.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm wondering is that where did the money go then? If I mean, I guess the money must have just really went into making sure that everything ran smoothly and that the ray tracing was there.
Well, I tell you where part of the money went, right? Because like a lot of those suits, as a, for instance, I don't know what percentage of the budget was, but I know it was different, right, than what the economics are for some other games from a project perspective. A lot of those Spider-Man suits were actually designed by Marvel artists, right? So Insomniac actually went to people who had worked on the Spider-Man comic, right, and got them to do renders and workups of some of those Spider-Man comics. So that's talent, right, that had to be paid. I'm sure those guys didn't just do that work for free. Again, I don't know that was a big budget driver, but the point is that was investment that went right in a direction for assets and work and a work stream that definitely wasn't done for like a Starfield, right, or something else that wasn't licensed. Ryan Landis, brings up marketing. I mean, there's a ton of marketing for Spider-Man, like the whole web, like semi truck.
Actually, the marketing, yeah, you know what, the marketing. That probably would include marketing because the marketing was crazy for Spider-Man 2. Like Spider-Man 2 was everywhere,
Right. So, BRAP, can we swing back to some of the questions that were asked on this topic then while we're at it?
Yeah. Go ahead. Since you're back, and then we'll pivot back to Bobby Kotick, your favorite antagonist.
Yeah, and you got both of the super chats, right?
I did, yes.
Okay, so one question for the panel: How can this hacked information negatively impact SIE for the medium to long term, knowing that 90% of PlayStation gamers won't know anything about the revealed games? I'll go first with my answer on that one. Then I'll ask the rest of the panel. I think I've mentioned this before. I think we mentioned this maybe even last week or at some point, or maybe during the rant or something. Again, your average person who's walking into a Best Buy or a GameStop doesn't know crap about the leak. It's not like the consumer. Like I talked about it, I think last week. I definitely kind of chunked up. Where is your buying incentive coming from? Right? It's consumer confidence. It's brand equity. Right. And while those things remain consistent, if those things are not shaken, then they're not going to have any impact. We have people running around saying this is a bad year for PlayStation. They haven't reported on what's coming out of their portfolio. They didn't show up at the TGAs in force, in air quotes, right? And I'm like, yeah. And despite all that, they've sold 50 million consoles this year. So if this year is a bad year, what do you expect them to do when they have a good one? So I don't think that the leak is going to be any type of a negative knock-on effect on the business pipeline at all. I don't know, Gene, do you have a different opinion?
Yeah, I feel like it wouldn't affect them. The only thing that would affect them is just the natural way of making AA games, AAA games. It just like someone said earlier, it just really feels like we're just gonna get a game per studio every generation, every 7 to 10 years. When it comes to the big AAA games, we didn't get a Grand Theft Auto during the PlayStation 4 console generation at all. That's it. Grand Theft Auto just skipped the whole generation. We used to get 3 in a couple years.
Yeah, and what's
I don't know.
What's interesting, Gene, about Grand Theft Auto? Like you're right. Like I didn't even think about it. I mean, it's probably always been in the back of my mind. Like, geez, we didn't get a Grand Theft Auto entire generation, but we didn't. But during that time period, they were pretty. I mean, Zelnick was literally wiping his tears, as you say, Logic, wiping his tears with dollar bills. Like it was the game. The game was charting NPD for like years and years.
Yep, still does sometimes.
Yeah,
and to be fair, obviously they made Red Dead also, but
yeah, they did make Red Dead. That's true. Yeah,
it's still wild for a series like Grand Theft Auto to just not have a game for an entire console generation.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting. We talk about the development of AAA games, the cost. One of the things that, and he's not here tonight, one of our co-hosts, B Money, mentioned is, I think maybe David Falke had mentioned this too, Logic, but the Sony's partnerships with like the China Hero Project, partnering with developers in India. B-Money had alluded to that PlayStation may be looking at ways to drive down costs of AAA development by going to other countries where maybe the resources there aren't as expensive as here in the United States. Yeah, is that you, Logic?
Well, yeah. Well, I think two things that are going on is So one of the things I talked about in the wake of the acquisition, I think people asked, "Hey, what does Sony need to do to respond?" And I said, what I expect them to do is I expect them to go out and look to seek long-term partnerships where they're not going after single exclusives, but they're saying, "Hey, publishing company, whatever, let's lock down a long-term relationship for like 3 exclusives," right? And we're seeing evidence of those types of deals being made.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. They just announced another partnership. I don't know if you caught that today with Koei. I think this is more mobile focused, and I'd have to pull the article again. But yeah, I mean, they're certainly. I mean, they just signed an agreement with who's the developer behind Stellar Blade? I always forget. I have to look it up.
No.
Yeah, I can't remember that.
Yeah, I'm trying to look
First,
it up right now.
First, they need to release Stellar Blade.
Well, yes.
I'm tired of seeing that game in fucking previews or whatever.
Yes, who's the developer?
Right, and
Stellar Blade? Shift Up. Thank you. Shift Up is. I say thank you. Thank you to Google.
And then in addition to those long-term partnerships, right? Going back to, like I said, when I was freelancing and did some coverage for the Gamers Beat or whatever summer thing, one of the things that a lot of that, there was a long discussion on one of the panels was, and I became aware of, is how there are kind of this regional cycling of outgrowth of talent, and how people say, hey, unfortunately the war is going on now, but for instance, right at that time, they're like, hey, talent, gaming talent is on the rise in Ukraine, right? So you'll see a ton of money start getting focused and flooding towards that geoeconomic region to incentivize and cause a growth in the gaming development industrial base, right? And then, like you mentioned, right, you may see that in indie. So there are these periodic hotbeds that happen in the industry where something kind of sparks, right, a growth of gaming talent, and you will see investment dollars flowing there to encourage that. And then you'll see it rise, somewhere else, and you'll see investment dollars. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that, while Microsoft is going around focusing on, investment in infrastructure and making partnerships, right, to outgrow their cloud value stream in order to aid their gaming business, that Sony is focusing their stream on, going towards talent, right, and again extending these long-term partnerships.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, you're seeing that right now. It's somebody, the Koei Tecmo being Koei Tecmo being another example of partnerships that they're making. The one with NC Soft, and some of these, like, I think Shui was at the India GDC recently. So you mentioned these hotbeds in the Ukraine. Is it the Metro developer in the Ukraine? Or am I thinking of another developer? I can't remember. Oh, Stalker 2 developers in the Ukraine. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I do want to move to back to Bobby Kotick here. I was asking Gene kind of what Gene thinks of his Kotick's legacy looking back as he exits December 29th. What his legacy is going to be. How we might look at him after his exit of at ABK.
I mean, I think part of it is going to be like we I was grappling on what to say, call him the Darth Vader or whatever, but he seems to be more like the Harvey Weinstein of the gaming industry,
Man.
Which I think is a little harsh because as far as we know, he hasn't like really touched anyone, But I think that he represents the power and everything like that. But I mean, the problem with Weinstein is that he actually put hands on people,
Yeah, he did some really.
That was the issue.
Yeah, he's a dirtball.
Yeah. So so I want to be careful in saying that, but I do think that he might end up looking like that unless other stuff comes out about him. Who knows? But
Yeah. What about you, Logic? I guess we lost Logic again. All right.
Oh no, yeah, we totally just lost him. Oh.
Yeah. Z. Yeah. All right. Maybe he. Hopefully he joins us here. Guess he's having technical issues. Yeah, I look at his legacy twofold. One, obviously, he was behind the tremendous growth of Activision, the acquisition of Blizzard King, taking Call of Duty to this astronomical level. That really, I mean, anytime a Call of Duty game is released, except for this year, within the first week, it's like the top selling game. If you look at the NPD Circana numbers, it's like the top selling game of the year that it releases. And there isn't a game, I can't think of any other game that does, in terms of revenue numbers, sales numbers, what Call of Duty does in the gaming industry. And he was part of that. But I also look at a lot of the stuff that happened under his watch, the toxic work culture, the threatening of employees, and then him cashing out. I'm not saying he shouldn't cash out. Obviously it's his, like I think you said, Gene, he was the brains behind the operation. And he's the CEO, and he made his shareholders a lot of money by selling off to Microsoft. He's going to reap the benefits of that as a shareholder.
Yeah, what a great CEO,
Yeah, I mean he did what CEOs are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Logic, can you hear us? It looks like he's back.
Yep, I can hear.
Yeah. So so we were discussing kind of Kotick's legacy as he exits on December 29th. I just gave kind of how I look at his legacy in two different ways. One, the CEO that built Activision to this juggernaut and Call of Duty, and then all the things that happened under his watch. The toxic work culture, the threatening of employees, things like that. But when you look back at his legacy, Logic, what is going to come to mind for you with Bobby Kotick?
I mean, the thing that's going to come to mind for me personally, right, is that legacy of the toxic work culture, right? Because I'm a minority. I've grown up right in the technical workspace. I've had to constantly navigate my own issues and help employees navigate their own issues. That unfortunately was the news about Activision for the greater part of a year. But from a business aspect, what will stand out to be, and that I think, maybe unfortunately will be the topic of discussion with other gamers, is what I mentioned to you today, which is that, Kotick will be credited as being the person who brought the Activision name back to relevance, which was really a mark that it really hadn't hit since the Atari years, right? I mean, since, Pitfall Harry 2 maybe was like the last time that I can remember Activision being like a big name. But through a lot of the 90s, and until we got into the early 2000s, right, with Call of Duty, it didn't hold nearly the same traction and gravitas that it had on the market as a third party publisher, the way it has, right, since the rise of Call of Duty. So, and nailing down the Blizzard right merger, and then dealing with Vivendi Universal, and gracefully negotiating them exiting the space. I think is from a business performance perspective, kind of what he'll be remembered for.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I forgot about the whole Vivendi Universal thing. Forgot about that. Yeah, and he was CEO. He was CEO from 1992 on. Is that
Yeah, pretty long. I can't remember the total years, but at the time when I looked at it during the merger, he was the third. I want to say the third ranked CEO in terms of longevity in his position. There were only like two other CEOs, maybe, that had seated CEOs that had been in place longer than him.
Okay, yeah. And Activision, for those wondering, founded in 1979. They actually split off from Atari over issues of creators' rights, and that was 1979. So,
Call of Duty, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Ron says phone gaming too, BRAP. Yeah, they acquired King. Candy Crush, the big juggernaut in the mobile space. All right, do you want to move on to the last topic of the evening? This is the year in review gaming 2023. I gotta say, like, this has been one of my favorite years of gaming in quite some time. Earlier in the show, I was discussing Baldur's Gate 3, which is my personal game of the year. Many of you listen to the show regularly have listened to me rant and rave about how great this game is. I absolutely love Baldur's Gate 3. I put well over 220 hours into the game now. I'm in my second playthrough, and even in my second playthrough, I am experiencing things, events, discovering new locations, new entry points at locations. I somehow missed a fight with a bunch of spiders in a cave. The first playthrough in Act 1. I somehow missed.
That's the fight I'm in the middle of.
Yeah, the one where they teleport.
Right.
Let me tell you that I was literally pulling my hair out for that particular fight.
So this is the funny thing. I'm gonna let you go on, but this is what you and I talk about all the time, right? Is how you're playing it, I'm playing it, and I haven't dumped the same amount of hours that you are into because I gotta complete my Call of Duty Battle Pass, but but we're having radically different experiences, right, based on how we're kind of flowing through the world. So I mean that's part of the great enjoyment of the game is those water cooler conversations where people are experiencing different things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point, Logic, and I'm experiencing different moments in my second playthrough than my first playthrough, as I mentioned earlier. And look, I don't know how I missed out on having Gale as part of my entourage, but I missed out on him. I'm glad I have him now. But it's such a great game. The dialogue, the voice acting, the different characters in this game. There's so many memorable characters. Asterion is still my favorite out of all the characters. But even you talked about like the different experiences that people are having with this game, Logic. I mean, I had a coworker literally call me today on Teams and say, Enrique, I'm on this mission. It's driving me crazy. It's Act 3. I'm like, what? I'm like, I didn't even play that mission. How did you get there? And he's telling me how to activate the mission. So I jotted that mission down. Like when I get to Act 3 again, I cannot forget. I need to play this mission. And I don't know how I missed it, but I did. So Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely my favorite game of 2023, but this has just been a great year overall in gaming. There's so many great games, whether they were AA, indie, AAA games. I really felt like there wasn't any downtime this year for me. And this is going to be one of those years that I remember for a long time as being one of the more memorable experiences that I've had in gaming over the last 40 years that I've been playing video games. Because and I own all platforms. I have, I primarily game on PC, but I have PlayStation 5. I engage in the Xbox ecosystem on PC. I have a Nintendo Switch. And each platform I thought had something that I enjoyed, and something that I really enjoyed. Starfield I enjoyed. I wouldn't say I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it. But each platform had something that was good that I thought was in the conversation as a potential game of the year for me. So, Gene, I want to go to you. What are your favorite memories of 2023 in terms of games that you played this year?
Oh man, it was such a long year. So I mean that's the thing. Like it's hard to not think that 2023 was such an eventful and fun year because there was just so much that happened. Hi-Fi Rush was a high starting point for me, mostly because I love Tango Gameworks, and I love character action games, Devil May Cry games. And Hi-Fi Rush to me is the best type of that game since Devil May Cry 5. And it was I put on my top 10 list of the year, and it was actually it was still my third best game of the year. I put it over Zelda, So for me, Hi-Fi Rush was such a strong start. Resident Evil 4 obviously was pretty great too. Where do I even start? Alan Wake 2 is my favorite game of the year. I think my overall assessment of the year is that although obviously we had so many high quality games, all the games that were so high quality are because they were trying to do the best versions of what happened before. So Zelda was a better version of Breath of the Wild. Baldur's Gate 3 is like the best computer RPG ever made, but it is definitely like within its genre. Um, what else? Resident Evil 4 was a remake, so just the best version of one of the best games ever made. Um, so that's why I feel like Alan Wake 2 is different in that Alan Wake 2's goal was to try to tell a really really different, interesting story. And the amount of times, have you played Alan Wake 2?
I have not played it yet. That's the
Yeah.
one, like, if we look at like the TGAs, the games that were nominated for Game of the Year, that's the one that I did not play.
If you
Yet.
watch and I don't recommend you watch the streams before you play it, but I've been watching a ton of people play Alan Wake 2, and the thing that people always say every single time is, I've never seen a video game do this before. I've never played a game like this before. And that to me is significant. That to me, I think, makes Alan Wake 2 the best game of the year because it is the most interesting game. It is the only AAA game that I think where people were saying that, where they were like, I've never played a game like this before. Baldur's Gate 3, everyone played it, and they're like, oh, this is just the best version of Baldur's Gate we can ever get. I would even put, if Elden Ring came out this year, I would put Alan Wake 2 over Elden Ring. That's how much I love Alan Wake 2.
All right, gee, you've piqued my interest now on Alan Wake 2.
To me, we got a game as good as what Kojima used to give us back in the day. That's what Alan Wake 2 is.
Oh wow.
So I think that in itself is a huge achievement. It's a game most like a Kojima game. Getting in 2023. What else? I don't know. I played so much fucking games this year. It was crazy. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 on the Nintendo Switch. They had a new DLC, Future Redeemed. I think that was the best like narrative of the year. Outside of Alan Wake 2, and Baldur's Gate 3.
I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I haven't played that.
I think it's if people are upset that Final Fantasy 16. Oh, Final Fantasy 16 came out this year. That's right.
Yeah, Final
If people are upset about Final Fantasy 16 being all action, I would recommend Xenoblade Chronicles. It's one of the main directors of Final Fantasy 6, and that's what and he was gonna be tapped to make Final Fantasy 7, but then his pitch for Final Fantasy 7 was too dark, so that's why they went with the Final Fantasy 7 story that didn't happen, and he went off to make his own story, which was Xenogears, and Xenoblade Chronicles is that guy. So if you want a story that harkens back to the old days of Final Fantasy, Xenoblade Chronicles is it, because it's the same guy. It's still the same guy doing it, and he's able to make the kinds of story that he wants to do, and the kinds of story that Square Enix didn't want him to make. So that's huge. Phantom Liberty also came out. Hogwarts mentioned. A lot of people were talking about how Hogwarts was snubbed, and obviously, I think the obvious reason was for the social reasons. But look, I played Hogwarts Legacy. I didn't finish that game. I got so bored of it. I'm sorry. I got really really bored of Hogwarts Legacy, and I will say, first of all, I'm not a Harry Potter fan. And this was before any of the J.K. Rowling trans stuff, anything like that. I just didn't like Harry Potter. I tried to read the book. I thought it sucked. I watched the movies. The movies were okay, I guess, but I only thought one of them was okay. So I don't think the Harry Potter world is interesting. So when I played the game, like if you thought, I could see that if you really really fucking love Harry Potter, that's the game for you, and I totally understand that. I don't think it's a bad game, but for someone who's not a Harry Potter fan, that was just like a nothing open world game for me. So for me, Hogwarts Legacy being snubbed totally makes sense, especially in light of all the other games right now. I don't think it would even make a top 10 objectively, honestly speaking. So that's my thought on Hogwarts. Phantom Liberty was amazing too.
I really enjoyed Phantom Liberty as well. Yeah.
Cyberpunk is not an ongoing game. That's so fucking stupid. I can't believe that. I can't believe like that's like Sifu winning best fighting game. Like I feel like that. No, that's just not what those games are. What the fuck are you doing? I will say that the Game Awards winners were usually pretty good this year. Even Game of the Year, even though obviously I disagree that Alan Wake 2 is better, I can't disagree with Baldur's Gate 3 winning Game of the Year.
Oh, yeah,
It's such a phenomenal game. I think it deserves to win anyways. So honestly, all the winners, most of the winners of the Game Awards besides Cyberpunk and I think best performance, because I think Ben Starr as Clive for Final Fantasy 16 deserved it. Even if Astarion, I think Astarion is a better character. Obviously, 100%, 1,000% a better character than Clive. I think Ben Starr's performance carried Final Fantasy 16, and that means something. You know, you can play Baldur's Gate 3 and have a great time without Astarion and performance. But Final Fantasy 16, I think a lot of the enjoyment hinged around how much you like, how good Ben Starr was. You know.
Yeah, that game doesn't work without Ben Starr.
Yeah, right. I don't think it'll be as good of a game.
Yeah,
I don't think it'll be as good of a game. I think he carried his performance carried the story through. You know, the story was okay.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the performance made it so much more interesting and entertaining and emotional. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't disagree. Like with Astarion, like even if you don't play with Astarion, like I'm not. He's not part of my the cast of characters that I'm I'm playing with right now. Actually, Gale's actually replaced Astarion, and Gale's a pretty interesting character.
Yeah,
there's something interesting about him. I haven't figured him out yet, but yeah, I don't disagree. Like,
I think Shadowheart's performance is better than Astarion's too. You know, and probably I'm saying that biased because like I think Shadowheart is obviously sexier than the sexy queer vampire,
than the pale vampire. Yeah,
so it might be like heterosexual bias there, but you know.
No, but Lizelle and Shadow, even those two, if you were just to play with those two. On your, I mean, the game would work very well still, and there's a cast of other characters that are very, very interesting. But yeah, I mean, but his role as Clive and kind of taking more. I felt like Final Fantasy 16 had a little more darker tone, more kind of a Games of Thrones type tone to it.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Final Fantasy 16 because like even I was part. Well, I gave it a good review, obviously, right? But you know, in podcasts, another thing I've been critical about it because I didn't think the story was that great. But in retrospect, I think the story was still pretty good because like it was very emotional. You know, it was a very good drama, and I think it hit those emotional beats well. And that's why I still even like the story. I liked it better than Spider-Man 2. I thought Spider-Man 2 kind of fumbled as a story, to be quite honest. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I liked I enjoyed the Spider-Man 2 story.
Gameplay, obviously, I think was fantastic, but I think the story. Yeah, I think the gameplay was much better in 2018. But you know, I did say that the game makes Spider-Man 2 makes Spider-Man 1 obsolete. But I meant that purely in terms of gameplay. Gameplay.
Yeah.
I actually booted up 2018 again on PC. I was like, I would rather play this again because I think the story is just so much better. They were just trying to do way too much stuff with Spider-Man 2. So I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's weird that PlayStation had a really, really quiet year. That's all we had is Spider-Man 2. That's it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it.
And Horizon Call of the Mountain, which didn't even win Best VR Game of the Year.
Yeah, and then Final Fantasy 16 as a
the FF16, obviously, and we're getting Rebirth in a couple of weeks. But I mean, that's it though. You know, that's it's weird in PlayStation land right now because we don't know anything what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get Wolverine until 2026. That's a long time. And good. I guess we're going to get Venom. And that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I think I'll probably like Venom a lot more than Spider-Man 2, to be quite honest. Especially if they introduce swinging gameplay to Venom. You know, because the Venom gameplay was really good in Spider-Man 2, and at least in terms of the combat, it was really fun. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely
and
was.
You can see parts of that in the Wolverine game too.
Honestly. I did see that the movement. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Did I play the Mario? I did not play Mario Wonders. I haven't played that yet. Somebody in the live chat asked me.
I liked it, but Spider-Man. I think the Game of the Year nominees were kind of messed up, and I would actually remove Resident Evil 4, Spider-Man 2, and Mario Wonder. Those are the 3 games I would have removed from Game of the Year. I don't think I don't think any of them should have. I would have replaced it with Final Fantasy 16. One of them, if anything.
One of them, yeah. All right. Any other games, Gene, that come to mind that kind of stood out to you, or that maybe had the opposite
Corey
effect?
Matthews is telling me that I have a very fanboy console war position because no one believes Sony is in a bad place. I don't know, you guys. Like, Corey, you tell me. Well, what games are you excited about in the PlayStation 5 console generation? You tell me. What are you looking forward to? What games from Sony PlayStation first party are you excited about? Are you excited about Concord? Marathon? I don't know.
Yeah, no, with the interesting with the, because we talked about the Sony roadmap here on this show. Like, obviously, I'd like to know more of what they have planned from a first party perspective, or not even just a first party perspective, but from a because we know that Sony is going to fill those gaps in with second, third party exclusive content. But at least for me, for 2020.
And the issue is that Microsoft is also having the same issue too. I think both Sony and Microsoft have. I think there is a big issue in the AAA space. You know, Nintendo doesn't have this because they make their games cheap and then they can pump them out very quickly. But Sony and Microsoft, they're struggling. You know.
Yeah, but what at least I've talked about on the show is the reason for the difference on those optics is because of what Sony's performance has been. I mean, the analogy that I've used and the thumb rule that I've used is, PC is my preferred platform, but I don't. And I made a comment earlier. I was going back and forth with Jason Ames in the chat, and I'm like, BRAP and I constantly have this war of ideologies, right? I don't sit on the edge of my seat in anticipation of games based on trailers. Like
I do.
games, right? A game doesn't mean anything to me whatsoever, whether or not it's a leak or a deliberate marketing or whatever, until the game has landed and it's in the hands of real gamers, and we start seeing what those assessments are. So my anticipation of why I own a platform and my enjoyment out of a platform is not based on my sense of. And I see the conversations on Twitter. People are always like, I'm going to play this in January. I'm going to play this in March. I'm going to play this in whatever. I mean, that's great if your life allows you to have that target line right to the future. That's just not how I think about games. Like, and stuff on PC comes out constantly, and I'm never worried about the production pipeline like being starved, because there is no first party on PC. When it comes to PlayStation, I hang my consumer confidence on what they've delivered to date. So the fact that they don't have a roadmap out and yada yada, like I just don't worry about that. Where I am today, because Xbox has had such a problem that has extended for a decade. Yeah, when they don't have a roadmap, and you can consider that unfair, I don't really care, right? When they don't have a roadmap, and I don't know what they're working on, and yes, they've populated their roadmap, but I'm still not saying, I'm not one of these people running around waving a flag saying Xbox owns 2024. They've already won, because none of those games have dates, except like 2 or 3, and we know Towerborn is coming, and that doesn't move the needle for me. So I own an Xbox. I'm not running down to GameStop to trade it in, but I'm not sitting here ticking off, right, that I'm super confident about what Xbox is going to deliver next year, because I just don't know. And what I expect is those blanks to be filled in by PlayStation, and I'm not sitting here worried about it. And I worry about it even less on PC. So that's just to stratify, just kind of at least what my perspective on it is, and why I think some people, as we're seeing in terms of consumer confidence, I talked earlier about consumer confidence and brand equity, I don't think there's a big tarnish on it, despite the fact that we don't know what PlayStation's lineup is going into next year.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, Game Logic. I would like to know. Again, I'm not saying because they haven't showed us a roadmap they're in trouble. I don't think that's the case with PlayStation. But no,
Sony's not in trouble. Like I'm not saying that Sony's in trouble. They're obviously making a ton of money. Yeah, that's a ridiculous thing to say. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make that clear that I'm not saying that PlayStation 5 is suddenly in trouble and going to start losing money. The issue is not the money here, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue. Go ahead.
No, and for me, I would like to see a roadmap, and only because for me, like, I've kind of felt spoiled by them with this generation. Like I go back to their launch window. If I just look at the body of work the first 3 years, and I compare it to other, like the PlayStation 4, I think they've done a much better job with exclusive content for the PlayStation 5.
PS5 had a better first 3 years than the first 3 years of PS4. People forget that the PS4 had a hard time getting off the ground. Actually,
it was we used to call it the indie station, as a joke. But
right.
Yeah,
right. Because fucking like games from the house mark were lifting things up.
Yeah, I mean Resogun, right? And then the runaway success of I don't want to call it soccer cars, but oh my god, what is it called now? Rocket League, that was an exclusive game on the PlayStation 4 for some time. So, and by the way, Gene, I didn't think you were saying like that Sony's in trouble, like the business Sony's in trouble.
Yeah. I'm mostly talking to Chad because like this guy Corey's out here telling me, do you think people really care if the game they want to play is a Sony first party studio or if it's a game they can play on PlayStation? I'm sorry, am I talking? Are the audience here casuals here?
I don't think Corey is.
You guys are. I'm pretty sure that I'm talking to a bunch of people out here in the chat and here in the podcast who understand and know the importance of first party games. So that's not even a question that's not even like within the realm of discussion here. So again, like I think people are thinking that I'm just thinking broadly PlayStation is going to be in trouble. No, that's not the case. And obviously PS5 had a really for me, day one, the PS5 paid for itself already because we got Demon Souls remade. I would have. We were talking about $1,000 flip flops earlier in the episode of $450 Jordans. Yes. I would have happily paid $570 for a PlayStation 5 and Demon Souls remake, and that's all I get. That's it. That's fine. So as far as I'm concerned, the PlayStation 5 has already paid for itself already.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the broader market, the broader plan, which is what can you tell me about what PlayStation is doing for 2024? Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, great. I'm glad that Square Enix is continuing to support PlayStation. What else is going on? Helldivers 2, okay. I'm excited for that one too. Okay, and then
Rise of the Ronin March. What was the other one you mentioned? I'm not interested in that.
You don't even know what Concord is.
Yeah, I mean. The only thing I'm interested in from them early next year is our the Rise of the Ronin and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I may pick up The Last of Us Part 2 because it has that new mode and it's a $10 upgrade.
Listen, the reason why a roadmap of exclusive content is important is because it shows you what you're investing in. When you buy a console, you're investing in a console's future, right? That will sell more consoles.
Well, I guess I feel that's again for people who pay attention to that. Right, there's a huge swath of the market that I would contend is they go into Best Buy, they go into GameStop, they say, I'm either thinking about buying a console and I'm on the fence, or they say they're going to buy a PlayStation 5 because that's what their friends have or that's what their friends have recommended. I think console roadmaps matter for those of us who are hyper attenuated to, what's in production pipeline. But I don't know that it's the vast majority of the market does what we all used to do, which is they go to the store and they turn the box over on the back when you used to be able to access the box sitting on the shelf.
I would argue that it actually matters what the hardcore buys because the general public will buy what the hardcore buys. They will follow what the enthusiast follows. If most of the hardcore gaming base is on a PlayStation, they're going to buy PlayStation. So, and that's what's happening, right?
Yeah, but I don't feel that. I mean, PlayStation 5 sold a crap ton of consoles this year, and that was clearly not attributed to any notion of what their production roadmap is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's part of it is because of the amount of trust that PlayStation built in terms of being able to produce interesting content, on a PlayStation console. Right. Spider-Man 2. I mean, Spider-Man 2 is a huge deal. That's going to move consoles.
Yeah, and that's what I said. It's in that case it's brand equity which you invest in over time, and then once you build it up to a certain extent, it takes a lot of backslide to burn it and tarnish it to the extent that it has a knock-on effect to your sales. And I just think we have a ways to go before PlayStation gets into that territory.
I mean, I'm not even talking about sales here, Corey and chat. Like, I'm talking about like you as a player. Are you satisfied with the amount of first party games that are planned for the rest of the generation, which is not long. We only got like 3 or 4 years left of PlayStation 5. You know, it's almost over. We're halfway done.
Yeah, we are halfway done. It's true. Let me grab the super chat real quick. Jeppy Game with the $5 super chat says, Gene, I have to push back on that. PlayStation 1, PS2 days was primary Sony partnerships with third party. It's about the entire portfolio first, second, and third. Thank you for that super chat.
So if PlayStation 5 had a bunch of third party exclusives, then I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying right now, right? If Grand Theft Auto 6 was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, then I probably wouldn't say what I said right now, right? Grand Theft Auto 3 was a PlayStation 2 exclusive. Metal Gear Solid 2 was a PlayStation 2 exclusive. PS2 and PS1 had a lot of third-party exclusives.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why we play PS1 and PS2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you, Gene, and I'll address this one comment in chat, but then I'll ask you the question. Gosh dang it, now I can't find it. Me first. I think me first. Yeah, they will follow what the streamers play. That's a take that I will absolutely straight out disagree with. I think live streamers, and I know that live streamers have a much less of a significant impact on the industry than they definitely think that they do. But at any rate, Gene, I want to ask you. So I understand you're not saying that PlayStation's in trouble, but then you're saying, hardcore gamers, you question what they have to look forward to in the PlayStation pipeline. But I think the question that I always come back around to, regardless of whatever comments anybody makes on the podcast, is always, okay, but what's the impact of that? Because if there's no impact to it, then the observation, I just don't know, has any.
The impact is me having fun. That's the only impact I'm thinking about in terms of what is there to look forward to in PlayStation, is that I don't know what to be excited for in the PlayStation 5 world right now, because I got nothing. I'm not talking about sales or anything like that. I'm just talking about me having fun and being excited for what's for what's coming up right now. I don't know.
Yeah, so you're talking about anticipated ownership, right? Satisfaction or return on investment, basically from an entertainment perspective. And I get that.
I'm going to play Rebirth, and I'm going to love it. I'm so glad that I'm playing on my PlayStation 5. And then after that, what's going to happen?
What's going to happen?
Yeah, and I just to point out, and then I'll close out. Like, again, and I think what we've talked about on this show, at least, is we have highlighted that there are, as I just said, right, there are some people, I know it's part of a conversation, and there's zeitgeist and there's fervor and all that stuff, but there's also a demographic that, like, I mean, it's great that the shows happen, but I don't know. And I'm not by any means saying that your perspective, like, isn't a value or isn't how other people think. I'm just saying that another perspective is those of us who just play the games that come out or look what's coming ahead in the next month and aren't as tightly coupled to the notion of what's coming down the road 6 to 12 months out.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm just looking forward to. I just want to know what games to look forward to, and at this point, I don't really know.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And I guess I'm speaking to this from as a Nintendo fan, because Nintendo fans we are so well fed. We just got a Metroid Prime remaster earlier this year. And
which is a really good game.
Yeah, really great game. We just got a new Zelda. We're getting all these Mario projects. It's never going to end. It's never going to stop. So as a Nintendo fan, they are constantly putting out first-party content all the time, and that's why the console is selling so well.
Yeah, and just again, just to point out, like, a difference of perspective, right? I'm the opposite when it comes to Nintendo, because actually on my Switch, despite the fact that I have a Steam Deck, we'll separate that conversation. What I most look forward to on Nintendo is when PC ports come to Nintendo and allow me to play them in portable format. And so a lot of times that's not highlighted. In fact, when those PC ports show up, I typically find out about them as an oh, by the way, and they're not always, like, placed out on the roadmap in a way that it informs us. So, I've been blasted, right, in various chats for going in saying, I have a lack of confidence in the Nintendo roadmap. Not a lack of confidence, but just like you're saying, I don't know what's coming up for me to play. And people talk to me about all these Nintendo first party titles, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't really play a lot of those. Again, I know that I'm an anomaly. right on the market. But and people are saying, well, what's on Nintendo's roadmap? I'm not sure what you guys have looked at, or maybe you feel like I feel like over the last two Nintendo Directs, particularly with the anticipation of a Switch 2 potentially coming out in the second half of next year, I thought that what they've lined out is pretty much to the vast extent like what the content is coming to that platform, the Nintendo Switch, through next summer. So.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Jim.
go ahead. Go ahead, Enrique. I spoke too much already. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I just, Corey Massey, I don't think, first of all, don't refer to our guests as fanboys. That's rude, number one, because you don't agree with their perspective. I understand Gene's perspective. I think, Gene, you're coming from the Gene the gamer perspective. The first, like,
exactly.
this is what Gene the gamer wants. I understand people who have that perspective. I'm not one of them where I'm like, oh, okay, I would like to see a roadmap, but I'm not like, I need to see a roadmap. And in part because my gaming style is a little bit different. I primarily game on PC. I have other platforms that I game on, but I do primarily game on PC. But I just don't like the idea of calling someone a fanboy because you don't agree with their perspective on something. When I think
I don't understand how I'm a fanboy when I'm saying PlayStation should have a lot of PlayStation games.
Yeah,
I don't understand. I don't understand that logic. So I have no idea what Corey's talking about. So I'm just gonna keep ignoring him for now.
No, fair enough.
I have no idea because he's trying to say, why are you saying this about Sony? I was like, I'm not saying anything about Sony. I'm just saying as a PlayStation owner, I just want to know. I bought a PlayStation 4 late, but I bought it because I found out that FromSoft was having their exclusive game come out on PlayStation 4 called the Bloodborne. So I bought PlayStation 4 once Bloodborne was going to come out. I bought it before, but because I knew that we were going to have PlayStation 4 was going to have Bloodborne. And I was like, okay, well, I need to have a PlayStation 4 if I want to be able to do this. I bought every single PlayStation console I've had because of an exclusive. PlayStation 3 because of Metal Gear Solid 4. PlayStation 2 because of Metal Gear Solid 2. PlayStation 1 because of Battle Arena Toshinden.
Oh wow, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah, I really wanted to fucking play Battle Arena Toshinden. So.
Yeah, I do. So Gene, in terms of, I know we talked about kind of bring the conversation back to the topic here. We talked about the your favorite games for 2023. There were any games that
I know FromSoft was first of all, I know FromSoft was a third-party game. I'm literally saying, where are the PlayStation 5 exclusive games? That's it. It doesn't have to be first party or third party. Again, Grand Theft Auto 3 was a third-party exclusive for PlayStation 2. Huge W. Obviously, that's why a whole bunch of us bought PS2.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what you're arguing against here. Anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so we talked about your favorite games of 2023. Any games that stood out that you were like, this isn't it?
Hogwarts Legacy,
which you mentioned earlier, yeah.
Where I was actually kind of looking forward to it. Look, the social aspect, whatever. It doesn't matter because the larger public doesn't give a shit about it. I'm sorry, it sucks to say, but. Like we live in DC, and you know how many people in the Democratic Party love Harry Potter? Like 90% of them. So, it's just a losing battleground in terms of the culture war. But Hogwarts Legacy, I tried to play it. I wanted to like it. I was really I think Magic games are underrated. That's why I liked Forspoken, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Which is a great PS5 exclusive. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard people actually say good things about, not everyone, but I was surprised by the number of people that play the game and actually liked it, as opposed to what I've read from, some of the reviews that reviewed that game. So I actually, it's something I may go back to at some point just to try out. But I do want to move on to Logic here. Logic, I know Call of Duty is your favorite game in 2023, but what else stands out for you this year?
Oh man, It's a dramatic pause because I am actually trying to get to my list. For some reason, it's taking a long time to open. Let's see. I mean, what was I happy about in terms of what I enjoyed?
What stands out to you? Yep.
Baldur's Gate 3, Metroid Prime Remastered, Resident Evil 4, Diablo 4, Starfield. I was actually kind of really happy. It wasn't a banner year in terms of super high quality across all racing games. I think the chat knows that I'm a big racing games and simulation fan. But I was overall satisfied with the volume of content. And so F123, Forza Motorsport were in there. But Age of Wonders 4, actually, because I'm a big 4X fan. And actually, I've mentioned that this was a year really for RPGs, but also really it was kind of a sneaker year, an ambush year for turn-based strategy games, if you're into that stuff. So like I said, Age of Wonders 4, Advanced Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, Fire Emblem Engage, Assassin's Creed Mirage was a big surprise hit for me. Just in terms of, I knew the game was coming out, but quite honestly, it stuck the landing a lot better than I thought it would be. Trepang 2 was something that I played, which I thought was really curiosity in terms of a first-person shooter that I felt was really kind of well put together. Had some design choices that I didn't quite agree with. But I mentioned racing games before, so it was, good on the Crew Motorfest to get out and to see Ubisoft supporting that game. Again, not a perfect game, but Dead Island 2 was definitely a surprise for the year. Loved Spider-Man 2. Was happy to see Everspace 2 again because I'm a big, flight sim, space sim fan. Outer World Spacer's Choice Edition was kind of a surprise collection that landed. It was one of those games that I haven't played just because I always thought it was, but it was just kind of below the threshold of my radar. But I was willing to jump in once they kind of had the collection all pulled together. And I'm really surprised at how well that game is in terms of just kind of, I think Obsidian often gets the short end of the stick. It doesn't get, the praise and the flowers that it should. At the end of the day, I'm not super happy. I've mentioned it before about Grounded and Pentiment kind of being part of the portfolio of releases over the last year. I would rather have them double down on the stuff that I really want to see from them, but I've always been happy with them as a studio, going back to playing some of the Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale stuff. But Spacer's Choice Edition was a really nice collection, plays really well, holds up well over time, so I was glad to get into that.
Man, you played a lot of games in 2023, Logic.
Oh, I didn't read off my whole list.
Okay.
Look, I mean, truth in advertising. The chat knows it. I talk about it on my show. I don't complete a lot of games.
Okay.
I'm not a completionist. It's I look to get in there. Enough time for me to be satisfied. I also hold things in my backlog and go back and revisit them. Well after the fact. So those are just some of the things that I put enough time in that I got a sense of them, and we're kind of happy with the product and how it landed and how it turned out.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, some of those I spent a lot of, I spent close to 40 hours or more in Starfield. I spent a lot of time in Fire Emblem Engage. I spent a lot of time chewing through Spider-Man 2. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with all those.
Yeah, I think I start my holiday break tomorrow, and I'm thinking, Gene, I think you said you had played God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, right?
I did, yeah. It's
great. And you said, I think I'm gonna download that tomorrow.
They should have charged $40-$50 for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I hear people say they would have paid to play that. So, all right. Then how about before we wrap up this topic, how about news stories for 2023? I think at least the big one for me is that finally the ABK deal's done, over with. We talked a lot about the deal. We had I forget, who do we have on Logic as a guest again?
Matt
Stoller.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Matt Stoller talk about Talk about really the issue with consolidation, mass consolidation in industry and in gaming in this case in particular. But I'm happy to have that over and done with. But that was a big news story this year, and then obviously I think to close out 2023, the Insomniac ransomware attack and the leaks that resulted from that particular attack. So, Gene, are they?
I feel so bad for Insomniac though, because as I said, Insomniac has been carrying this not even just the PlayStation generation, but like the console generation in general. Like if we didn't have these games to play, like this whole console generation would be so much poorer. And then the way we thank them is by fucking them up like this. That sucks, man.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate. But Gene, is outside of that news story, is there any other news stories of 2023 that kind of stand out to you?
I don't know. It's been such a long year. I'm already forgetting all of it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I guess I'm so glad that we got over the ABK thing. I was so fucking tired of that news cycle and everybody pretending they're studying lawyers and everything. It's. I hate whenever like a controversy happens and then all of a sudden everyone's like suddenly an expert in whatever the controversy is about for a little bit. That was so exhausting to hear, and especially since if I can rant about like the journalism complex a little bit, like it just goes to show that how people aren't really familiar with covering court cases, because so much of this court case was covered as if it was like the most important thing in the world, and a lot of like small procedural things were being highlighted when they didn't need to be, so that's why we just kept hearing about it all the time, because every little movement in of documents just meant something to someone. I don't know. Which is exhausting.
And just to piggyback a comment on that, Gene, and I apologize because I'm gonna slag some of your peers, in the space. People on this chat have heard me say, covering a court case is not you making snarky comments on social media about which political side you stand on, right? Your taxpayer dollars at work, snarky comments about the FTC and Lena Khan. I don't personally need that from you if you're labeled yourself as a journalist,
sure.
right? I need you to cover the story, issue the facts, keep your personal comments and stuff off on some other channel that's not directly associated with you as a journalist. That's just my personal perspective.
Yeah, the Lena Khan's association with Biden just like makes everything even like so stupid too. So.
The other thing that was kind of from the way some journalists covered it, the court case, they kind of treat it like as they were watching like a football game. Oh my God, like that, did you see that hit? Like it was kind of like that. And I'm like, what? Like what? The lawyer just owed the FTC lawyer. It's like, have you guys never watched a court proceeding?
Yeah.
Like I'm just
so glad that I hope we never have to do another court case as the games industry ever again.
I hope so too, Gene. That was painful. And to your point, Gene, like everyone, I guess what was frustrating too is everyone suddenly became a legal expert.
Yeah.
Or everyone became an expert in M&As and consolidation. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to have Matt Stoller on.
Oh, you guys had Matt on. That's good.
Yeah, we had Matt. We had Matt on. What was that? Logic. That was this past summer, definitely.
This summer, yeah.
Yeah, and he was discussing the history of consolidation in this country, in the U.S. We were trying to also get Corey. What's his name? Corey Doctorow, who wrote a book, Choke Point Capitalism. Which talks about I don't know if you've heard Corey. I don't know if you follow Corey Gene on Twitter, but he's talked about the enshittification of is it social media logic or is it technology? I think it's technology.
Enshittification is mainly about how technology firms in Silicon Valley and particularly big tech firms enable choke point capitalism and devalue and kind of drain the value out of various markets, directing, transferring that value intake, that revenue stream from the actual originating suppliers to themselves as the gatekeepers.
So. But
and the big thing is and then pit suppliers against consumers, so that consumers, like, they come off as like the great good guys, right? Because they're the ones who are trying to get people stuff cheap, but the suppliers who are upstream, who are trying to make a living, are made out to be vilified and be the big bad guys.
Yeah. So I that's a story that I won't miss. But geez, I feel like if Microsoft makes another big acquisition, we might be here discussing this again. I don't think they will. I don't think they're done making acquisitions, but I don't think they're going to make that big of an acquisition.
I hope they're done.
Yeah.
So over it.
Yeah. So, all right. So, I want to thank everyone in the live chat. Unless anyone has any closing commentary before you wrap up the show.
Oh, last comment is I'm bummed about Last of Us Online being canceled. That fucking sucks.
Oh, that was another news story. That is a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, I am definitely part of the community that Broken Games HDR is part of, where we're small but few factions players. We loved factions. You know? All we wanted was factions too. All like I said on Twitter, all I wanted was for my Joel action figure to fight the Abby action figure in online digital combat. That's it. I don't need a content calendar or begging for whatever new content or whatever like that. I just want to fight Joel versus Abby in a one-on-one combat and just do that for a couple weeks with a few friends. It's all sell us a couple of skins too. Why not?
Yeah.
I was bummed about that.
Yeah.
So BRAP, just a few other news stories that went down to round out the year. I think here in the month of December, we forget that Google shut down Stadia back in January. Pour one out for Stadia. Yeah. RIP, yet another Google product. ESA announced that E3 for this year was canceled at the end of March. And of course, that then barrel rolled down the hill to the eventual announcement in December that it was canceled for good. We got heads up on the slowly, the car accident that we're watching in slow motion now. That is the dissolution. I shouldn't say the dissolution. The high times of adversity for Embracer Group back in June. That talked about that they would be restructuring throughout the year, which has of course led to a lot of closures and layoffs. I think those were. I'm trying to see if there were any other big ones. Of course, Jim Ryan announced that he was leaving PlayStation in September.
He was fired.
And unfortunately, layoffs and studio closures has just been, the news story around the entire industry for this year. There was one other big news story in here that I was missing. I guess it's, while all of our eyes were on the legal case for the Activision acquisition, the other big legal case, which may actually have more ramifications here in the short term, is Google losing the jury trial in Epic Games versus Google, which just occurred.
Right. I haven't even caught up with that. I don't even know what that's about.
Yep, that's a jury finding that Google basically participated in anti-competitive behavior and established an illegal monopoly with the Play Store, because the thing that they were found guilty of, which Apple hasn't been tied down about, is that Google was actively engaged in making various deals to minimize any potential competition arising to its store, which Apple, at least at this point, has not been caught in terms of any collusion in operating with other vendors in a way to do anything with the App Store other than their draconian dictatorship of the App Store that they lead entirely on their own.
Yeah, I forgot. Logic, thank you for bringing up all those news stories, and Gene for bringing up the the Last of Us factions 2 being canceled. I mean, yeah, those were all big news stories this year as well.
Yeah, I think player play is. Can you explain how that affects us as console and PC gamers? Player play, I'm kind of really surprised because I think you are seem to be very much an Xbox fan. I mean, the knock-on effect is that obviously the mobile gaming space is rising. Microsoft, Xbox has plans to try and prop up a mobile gaming storefront marketplace of some type, which is very difficult for it to do if it's not allowed to do that right by Google, who owns the Android platform, and Apple, who owns the iOS platform. I don't think that's a very particularly engaging prospect if they have to do that through the browser, as they have to do on the Apple platform now. Apple has similar findings against it in the EU. And so that all of these things may converge in a place that allows Microsoft to make its approach to the hybrid cloud compute gaming platform that is part of their objective and part of their target line. So that's how it could affect you. And what we're seeing the rise of processors in the mobile space that allow, I would say, gaming at a fidelity that is much closer to console-like than it has ever been before. And if that increases, you again could start to see that kind of convergence of platforms and parity amongst a certain stratification of games, certain strata of games.
Yeah. Ryan Lynn says Time Splitters canceled. Thank you, Ryan. All right, gentlemen, any other closing thoughts before we wrap up the show?
No.
All right. Well,
Corey Massey, you're the fanboy. I'm kidding.
Well, Gene, first of all, no worries. Gene, thank you so much for joining us. It was really great having you on. Yeah, absolutely. We'd definitely love to get you back on the show. And like I said, it's always great meeting someone from the DMV, virtually speaking. And discussing video games.
We should hang out sometime IRL. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't been to DC in some time. I need a good culinary. I live in the suburbs, and where I live, we don't have great culinary experiences or good restaurants as DC. I miss, like I said, I miss working in DC. The food, so many different choices. I miss the variety. Not just DC, but like the surrounding areas, Arlington, Alexandria. I mean, there's just so many great food choices. But no, Gene, thank you so much for joining us again. I appreciate the time. And I don't know if you want to be found, Gene, but if you do, please let everyone they can find you on social media.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram because I'm trying to get 10,000 followers on Instagram. So follow me on Instagram, Gene Park there. I'm also on Twitter, and you can find me at the Washington Post. Just Google Washington Post and Gene Park, and you can find all my stories.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. Please.
Oh, and also patreon.com/laststandmedia. Can't forget my other job too.
Yeah, absolutely. The Punching Up podcast. Great show as always. I really do enjoy all the content that Last Stand Media is putting out. Punching Up, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke. It's just they're great. They're doing a great job over there. It's. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, everyone, please hit the like button. But if you haven't done so already, Game Logic. If you want to be found, please let everyone they can find you as well.
So you can catch me over on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast or on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. We are on hiatus until the 7th of January, but you can see our end of the year Gaming Superlatives show that we recorded, I guess, a week or two ago. 2 episodes of that are posted over at the channel where we kind of give out awards that are oriented along the lines of kind of your high school superlatives. So if you think about kind of most likely to succeed, class clown, etc., we have 14 categories that all 5 co-hosts make their own picks through. So we go through those in 2 different episodes. And then if you want to catch my live streams, you can catch me over on the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube as well.
Thank you, Logic. Appreciate that. And to everyone in the live chat, again, thank you for hanging out with us this evening and for hanging out with our guest, Gene Park. Look, everyone, have a happy and safe holidays. Mm-hmm. I may do a show next Wednesday. I'm not sure. Maybe not because it's the holidays, but I may. But if you want to get up to speed with, when we go live, obviously subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification. But you can also follow me on Twitter at @BRAP_podcast. So, but everyone, again, have a happy and safe New Year. I can't believe 2023 is over. It's just in a blink of an eye. This this year has just flown by, and
This year went by so fast. It's crazy. A lot of stuff happened, but also it went by so fast.
It did.
Sucks.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And, 2024 is going to be here. And, so hopefully 2024 is also a great year in gaming, great year in general as well. But anyhow, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. And again, I may or may not be live next Wednesday, but I'll let everyone know on my Twitter account. And then also if you subscribe, you'll get notifications as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We'll catch you next time.